Mike is running a few moments.
Oh, you want to hold up?
No, we can move forward, but with the discussion.
Okay. Okay. All right. You gotta hit your thing first. Good afternoon, everyone. It's the call to order for the February 5th Planning Commission meeting. Especially like to welcome our new commissioners, Sandy and Mary Beth. So welcome. And also thanks for the public for attending. Mr. Reynolds, you want to call the roll call, please?
Dr. Curran,
Present.
Mr. Iwan,
Here.
Mr. Baronet,
Here.
Mr. Conway, Ms. Devine,
Here.
Ms. Hennessy,
Here.
and Ms. Mary Beth, I would like to know how to say your last name.
Commercial, and I'm here. It loosely rhymes with commercial.
There we go. Thank you.
So the first thing on the agenda is for our approval of prior meetings, meeting minutes. And we got the December 4th and December 18th yesterday. I imagine everyone's had a chance to review those. Can we have a motion to approve the December 4th minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any corrections or discussion? Okay. All in favor of approving the December 4th minutes, say aye.
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 Okay, same thing for December 18th. Reviewed those minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the December 18th minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or corrections?
I've submitted corrections to Petra on one item on those December 18th, so as long as that's included, I'm fine.
Okay. All right, so all those in favor of approving the December 18th minutes?
Aye.
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 Okay,
Technically, Sandy, you weren't part of the meeting.
Had that question.
Yeah, no, you and Mary Beth have to abstain.
Abstain.
okay. And we're going to forego the just January 8th minutes since we just received those.
Where are they?
Oh, they just came in an email.
Oh,
this
in an
afternoon.
email, okay.
All right, the next thing on the agenda is public comments regarding agenda items. Any public that wish to, okay, please state your name.
Amanda Mole with Kiowa Partners. So I wanted the opportunity to comment on Old Business C, the zoning text amendment for the pervious paving requirements. There, and it's really just some things for you to think about as you're considering the changes. There, and some background information you may or may not be aware of. So the current language aligns with the restrictions, the coverage restrictions, and designing with nature. It's not expressed exactly the same way, but the intent is aligned. And that was intentionally done a number of years ago. The town zoning and the ARB worked together to come up with language that would basically give some latitude to a design team to come up with good solutions for how a lot was being developed without necessarily having to go to the BZA. And that's where the secondary coverage for pervious elements kind of came from a concept perspective. So if, currently as written, there's a proposed reduction in coverage for secondary pervious elements. So two things. One, that then minimizes the ability to have those creative solutions. But it also, I'm kind of just question, how does that benefit the overall goal since those are already pervious elements to begin with? So just something to think about as you are kind of working through this. Another is just sort of noticing in the text, there's once, the Planning Commission has actually put a new recommendation in front of the town, and the town does their public hearings and so on and so forth, there's sort of a target date for when this would become effective. And it's a little aggressive. It has it, in early April. But as you may or may not be aware, homes going through the review process could be in the review process for 6 or 8 months. And there are many designs in the process currently that are based on the current guidelines, and no longer having those secondary elements, having those reduced at this stage in the game for many applicants would be really pretty, it would be many difficult choices. They would have to go back and redesign to some extent. So it's not necessarily just having submitted for a zoning permit by a particular date. You may want to think a little bit more broadly about where somebody is in the design process before sort of setting goals and deadlines for things. And then the last point, I think there's also reference to design community buy-in, and I know there have been some community meetings and a few folks have attended, but I don't think that the design community at large is really aware of these changes. So it's just another thing to kind of really think about. So, thank you.
Hey, may I ask a question? The first one, you said reduction in coverage. Explain to me what the impact is. I mean, I understand you said we're reducing coverage and that's going to have an impact, but what's the impact?
Well, you might not be able to, it's multi-layered, and you would have to look at case-by-case examples, but currently you have a certain amount of secondary coverage that you can do on top of just the regular impervious areas. And that allows for creating solutions for driveways and such that work around trees or create a better entry experience, or from a design perspective. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of things that benefit from being able to have that extra few points of percentage.
So if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that with non-pervious elements, they could build on top of it. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay.
No. So currently, and John might want to help out here a little bit, but the way that the ordinance is written, it aligns with the ARB guidelines, but I'm more familiar with the ARB guidelines. And so from an ARB guideline perspective, you have a maximum coverage for anything that's impervious, and you also have some additional credit that you can go over that if it's for pervious elements that are secondary in nature.
Okay,
Not required.
So this is a benefit. If somebody uses impervious, they get some benefit. They can be able to have a more pervious coverage or non-pervious coverage?
Yes and no. It's for example, if your maximum coverage, lot coverage on a particular piece of property is 33%, and you have some elements to your driveway that are not required, but assist in the feasibility of working around a tree or some other thing, then you have the ability to install it perviously. Of course, we're going to go towards more pervious, but you have the benefit now of being able to make some pervious coverage that gives you better functionality. So
And that's where
I would
the
almost
increased
have to
lot
do
coverage came from.
case-by-case studies to really explain that, maybe.
And you're referring to for the 33%, it was originally 20% additional coverage, and now it's down to 10%.
Right.
So we're still allowing extra coverage. It's not as much as the first rendition.
Exactly. And while it maybe it doesn't matter in the end, I think what it does impede, and on occasion, the ability to have a better design for the property. And as I mentioned earlier, in the past, it was also with the ability, because the BZA has such very strict categories of things in order to be able to grant a variance, that this allowed for better solutions to work around trees or other kinds of things without necessarily having to go through an actual BZA process.
So what I hear you saying is that if by reducing this, we'll probably have more activity on the BZA.
Correct, that would be another way to put it.
So are you saying that the increased coverage that they're using is not for a bigger house? It's more for going around trees or whatever?
Or other kinds of things. It's not right, exactly.
So they
It's not-
can't use it to just increase the lot coverage on their house?
No, no.
That's capped at 33.
Correct. Along with other key elements, along with required elements of the driveway, such as getting to your garage, getting to your front door, your parking spaces, and other kinds of things. Thank you, Matt.
I guess I would just wait till we get actually to that part of the agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sure Amanda would come back if we asked her.
I'll be here.
Any other, sure.
Matt Wilson with Three Oaks Contractors. We do a lot of construction and some design work on the island. And just to expand on Amanda's comment, we got this from Petra like, I think about a week or so ago, maybe a little bit longer. So I haven't digested all of it, and I know a lot of people in our field, as far as contractors and designers, I thought there'd be more representation here than this, but I'm not even sure if they're aware of it, because I wouldn't have been aware of it if I hadn't received an email. But I would like to have, I think it would be worth it to have some sort of workshop to kind of talk through this with specifically contractors and design staff, if you're going to include driveways. To me, it seems like a good starting point for a lot of other issues, like you're saying, some roads, some parking lots, and some other things. But at this point, I think driveways ought to be eliminated. There's so many good examples of concrete driveways on the island. The pervious materials, it seems like it's going to open up this thing of just kind of a multitude of solutions and what looks best and what doesn't look best, and who handles the design criteria around what material you're using as far as pervious. To me, it would be one of those things where you could keep concrete driveways and replacements, and if you wanted to go to pervious, maybe you're allowed some sort of concession like extra coverage or extra secondary coverage. But to kind of eliminate concrete driveways at this point seems a little bit harsh. And the fact that also is, we do a lot of driveways on the island. So as far as, demo and kind of replacements, I think it's going to be putting a lot of owners in a little bit of hardship. There are pervious solutions that are economical as far as in-line prices with concrete, but most, I would say more than 80% of the pervious solutions are, I would say 2 to 3 times the cost. And on a personal note, we have 2 or 3 concrete crews that's all they do out here all day, every day, is replace and re-pour concrete. So they'd be kind of looking for other avenues of work. So I think that's most of what I've got. Like I said, I'd push to have some sort of design workshop, contractor workshop on specifically the driveways, and possibly think about just eliminating driveways out of this language.
Matt,
Yes.
if we had some sort of workshop like that, doesn't it also need to extend to architects because they're doing big picture planning and redevelopment work?
Most definitely. Architect, I know we had a couple of other meetings when we were talking about trees, and it seemed like we had a lot more representation here, but I haven't talked to anybody specifically, and I talked to a lot of people that have known about this meeting or this change. So to me, yeah, most definitely. Architects, I would even think to be real honest with you, general contractors would be a good one because, you know, they're the ones, for the most part, representing their clients on what they can, can't do. But architects, landscape architects, you know,
But by the
I know
time it
there's other
gets to the
contractors here too.
contractor, it's already been through the design phase, whether it's new construction or redevelopment. So we've really got to go all the way back to architects if this is coming down the road, or am I missing something?
No, definitely. I mean, it just depends. I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways people go about, you know, development on the island. Some people, you know their general contractor and then they help bring in the architect and the
Right.
builder and everybody else. But I do think general contractors would have a presence and some comments on this as well. But I do think it would be worthwhile having some sort of workshop like that just to hear more representation than just mine. But
Well, that's where we were at last time we discussed this, is that kind of what the commission asked for was to delay the discussion until we did have more input from the design professionals. Can I just ask you, a question? Do you have much experience at this point putting in impervious driveways? You do, okay.
Yeah, so that's just one of the invited guests we've asked to come and share today. So at that time of the agenda, when you guys wanted, I mean, I know that was public comment separate, but if we wanted to have more the back and forth dialogue, I think we can, Patria's begin to work with those who are invited today to kind of share, ask some beginning questions. So I think we'll be able to have a robust dialogue to some of the questions that have been asked or addressed so far. So the direction of you guys, however you want to kind of handle that.
Any other public comments? Okay, moving on to old business, comprehensive plan update.
This will be very brief. We have a working draft, a few more small clippings of edits that need to be occurred. Stephanie and I are working through those. And so I'm just kind of waiting on Stephanie to share those details, and then we'll get our work group back established. And I'd anticipate hopefully we can do that next week or the week after, but we're really close. So subsequent to that work group meeting, we anticipate for that group to power through and look at those amendments based on the revised draft, and we'll bring that back in for the entire commission for further study, along with the general public to be able to see that document. But that's kind of where we are and Kiwa next.
Can I make a suggestion? Based on what came out at the council retreat and stuff, some of the sections could probably use a little more intensive work. I see Ms. K is in the audience. I was thinking it might be worthwhile to have her meet with someone to go through the resiliency section. She might have some good additions that we should look at. I think some of the town council members brought out some strategic things that we didn't include, so it might be worth one or two of us sitting down with some of them to see, to get some of their input before we, quote unquote, finalize the document.
No, so I would encourage that little small work group, just like we've done before, where we brought Councilmember Farrell in as part of that, and we can potentially bring a council member in as that small little work group to follow along those lines of what you just outlined.
Any other discussion?
Nope.
And then moving on to the Planning Commission rules and procedure.
So from our previous meeting, it was deferred to this meeting that we review our rules of procedure. And what has been provided to members of the commission is a revised draft based on comments that were received individually by all of the commissioners. We thank you for all of those. It's everything that's in red is proposed new text. So staff is just recommending that as we go through this, potential changes I anticipate or modification of the language, that for procedural wise, that we first entertain a motion to discuss it, and then separate motions in between that for specific language. If there are questions about general, I think we can start there. Mac or our town council is also here, that maybe want to address a few things regarding language notes that are in the proposed draft, but I would start, Mr. Chair, with any general questions or comments before there is any motion regarding making amendments to what's been provided.
Yeah, oh, by the way, it's Iwan and rhymes with Taiwan. Anyway, the question I have is just, is this the same copy that we got on, that was sent to us earlier this week or last week?
Correct.
Okay, so we don't have to reread, okay, thank you.
Okay.
I also have a question, and John, we talked about this just in terms of process. I appreciate the fact that this is redlined, to be able to see the changes from earlier iterations. But it would be, from my vantage point, it would be super helpful to be able to see the genesis of who made what proposed change here, because you've made the point that staff kind of took in feedback and generalized it, and, it's reflected here. But, just to be able to track back in terms of where comments are coming from, how to put those in perspective, I personally would find it really helpful if this was truly redlined with comments, which means that you can track back to sort of the history of how you got to this particular language.
Yeah,
Is that not possible?
So it administratively, when we have 7 commissioners submitting comments, in order to deduce that, opposed to us scheduling a meeting for us to work through all those collectively, then the easiest way for us to just gather that and more so address the general concerns. There were a lot of comments that were submitted that were similar, so the language and trying to author 7 different perspectives that address the same concerns, that's the staff take that ability to kind of essentially, to your point, generalize, but essentially address the concern opposed to the actual language or text. If there's specific process-wise of how to do that, I think this has been the most efficient, just because it's just having so many people provide different comments. It's just easier you guys to filter that through a sole source.
I appreciate that. You may want to just poll the rest of the commission. I know I'm the new person here, so I'll play the new person card here for a moment. But believe me, I've read very complicated, 100-page contracts with many, many comments that are annotated. And you can filter them or not filter them. It depends on sort of what the rest of this commission feels. But from my vantage point, that's really kind of important, both in terms of sort of onboarding here and sort of understanding different people's perspectives, but also figuring out sort of how those have been abstracted by staff and find their way into this language.
Yeah, and part of the.
I'll stop there.
Yeah, part of the other part of it, this platform of our meetings allows a little additional context and discussion, so whereas you can have that engagement about intent or clarity of the language.
I just wanted to chime in there also, not to pile on. I think having more of a live document that you can see edits, you can see history, it would be terribly helpful to me as well. I'd also feel like it's a little bit more of a working document in terms of how it reads when we get to the final piece of it. Is that just not technology we're comfortable using?
No, it's just administrative pain to be able to do that.
Well, not
Easier.
if it's a live document that say, I'm redlining, Sandy's redlining, and you can see that I did it, I would think it would take weight off of you all administratively.
Yeah.
Are there specific things that have not been addressed? I'm trying to get to what it's in the document that's not specific, or it's just more so about seeing other commissioners' comments?
I guess maybe Sandy and I are the ones jumping in because we're trying to wrap our heads around some of the genesis of some of the comments. If we're at a point where there are some particular concerns, but we've moved from a 4-page document to a 6-page document for a group of people that's governed largely by South Carolina code. So I question if we are creating something that's going to be even tougher for us to live by. Perhaps I'm the only person who wonders that. That's my overall comment.
Okay.
Any other specific, besides anything that we want to speak or address specifically that's in the document right now?
Well, we're going to be going through it section by section, correct?
Okay.
Or article by article?
Mac wanted to make some comments. You want to make your comments now?
Yes, sir. So just a couple legal, a lot of this, I mean, ultimately under state law, you set your own rules of governance, but there were some things in here that I just wanted to bring to your attention. Certainly, and there are policy reasons on either side as to whether the chair is elected based on the old rules, which was prior to new members coming on, which is what happened in like last month's meeting. These new rules have the election of the chair after the new members are brought on. You certainly can change your rules. We're totally fine with that, but there is, under state law, at 629-360, it does say that a local planning commission shall organize itself, electing one of its members as chair and one vice chairman, whose terms must be for 1 year. So the current chair and vice chair will need, that were recently elected, will need to remain for a year, but then the timing of the election next year will be different than it was this year. So one, just wanted to make that clear that we can't, it would be a violation of state law to change the rules and then have a new chairperson immediately at the next meeting, based on this change in the rules. Does that make sense or no? I see.
Are you talking about this cycle, or are you worried about next cycle? That,
The next cycle will be fine, but if y'all change your rules at this meeting and then the next meeting attempted to appoint a new chair, that would be in violation of state law. And in that same vein, so that was section 3. In that same vein, section 8 talks about removal of office. So there's nothing specific, like state law says they must serve for a term of a year. So this is kind of a gray area. I think it's probably okay. Like if somebody, for the actions, let's see, the nature of removal is for misconduct, neglect of duty, or malfeasance. And so if you have you appoint a chairperson 6 months in for whatever reason, they just stop showing up to meetings, vice chair doesn't show up, then somebody, for multiple meetings, I think you probably have that, but it's also in conflict with the statute that I just read that says their terms must be for a year. So just something to consider. There's potentially some risks there. But at the same time, I totally get why if the person just goes MIA or does something, leaks confidential information outside of executive session or whatever, that may be grounds potentially for removal based on your rules, but there's nothing in the state statute, in the section I just read that touches upon, removal of officers of the Planning Commission. So something.
So does that mean we can never remove an officer, or how do you then manage that?
Should we do that when we get to each section?
Yeah.
And make a motion
Okay.
rather than jump from section 3 to section 8? And then we can hear whoever added this, let them talk about.
Okay.
Sure,
I don't know. I
yeah,
mean-
but to answer your question, that's a very good question. I mean, that's my point, is if you've got a chair that is doing, let's take it to the extreme, doing something illegal, comes to me, they get arrested and they go to jail. You certainly ought to be able to appoint a new chair before their year term expires. So, but I just wanted to point out, that's, the state statute says they must serve for a term of a year, period, full stop. So it is what it is. I think that's probably okay, but at least wanted to bring that to your attention. And we can go, I've got one other comment, I can go through it, or we can go through each section, however y'all prefer to do it.
It sounds like we want to do each section, so.
Okay.
Why don't we
Yeah.
start?
I think that makes more sense. Because then we'll discuss it. at the moment.
Any discussion about the first section, purpose and function?
Who added that? I mean, to your point, who added that?
So John and I.
Exactly, yeah.
John and I looked at another municipality's Hilton Head rules and procedure, and they had a introduction similar to this, and I thought it would be a good idea to include a brief introduction. So John wrote this.
I don't see the need for it. it's not offensive. What do you guys all think?
I like short and sweet, so I think it's just one more thing, but I mean, I don't have a problem with it.
I'll just add one note here. During the discussion, it was more so of thinking in the long-term capacity of the planning commission when we do onboard new members, in the ease of transition, to give them a little bit more in our technical documents of their roles and purpose. And so, yes, we will have our normal required onboarding and orientation trainings, but every living document that rests with the town would be able to, for that new commissioner to be able to see their roles and functions. And so it's kind of setting the tone across all living documents.
It seems like a mission statement, and I don't see the need for it in our rules of procedures, honestly.
Well, like I said,
It's extraneous to me, but I can
it's
go
kind
with
of not rules and procedures, I agree with that, but it does kind of give us an introduction to the purpose of the planning commission.
So you can look at it from the other perspective too. Is there a reason not to have it?
I don't
Other
have a
than
strong-
brevity.
I don't have a strong feeling.
I don't either.
Yeah, I don't think it,
Remember
I mean, I
last,
think it's extraneous, but I'm not.
yeah,
it's
but
not.
remember last time, we added principles of serving and standard of integrity. That was added last time. Again, I think it's taken for granted when somebody, takes the position, but I'm okay with that too.
all right. Any other discussion about the second section, principles?
Joanne, did you want to vote on each section as we went through it?
Would that make it easier? So what we have to do then is
Yeah.
make a motion
Yeah.
to, we move that we're going to accept the rules of procedure
Okay.
with a second, if we all agree to that, then we go through section by section and we amend
Okay.
what's in front of us. Would be the correct procedure. I
All right,
think.
if you all are ready to move forward, begin to make those changes, and as stated, motion for consideration of approval, and then we can come back as amended once those individual amendments are made motions on.
Yeah, so we'll make a motion to approve the rules of procedure. You have to do that.
Moved.
Second?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Hi.
All right,
So now we have to take
section one.
section one and make a motion whether to approve or disapprove the red line section one.
Okay. So section one, a motion to approve it or amend it?
I move that we approve section 1 as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No need discussion first.
Aye.
Discussion?
You have to,
Any discussion?
Any discussion?
Oh.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, down to section two, principles of serving standards of integrity.
that line, carefully consider any promises made and keep them was eliminated. I would make a motion, we eliminate that.
Well, this is eliminated, isn't it? It's struck.
But
in-
it's struck in the red line. It was in the last one, so we have to,
Oh, we have to strike it?
anything redlined, we have to vote on.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, you can, if it's in the documents, you can, that original motion covers it. So you don't necessarily have to make it a motion to remove it, because in this proposed document, it's already been
Okay.
removed.
We're accepting the change. Okay.
Any other,
May I ask a quick process question, please?
Sure.
Can we, if we approve this today, this language in this section, can we still tighten up some language, like make some things consistent verbally? Or does that then have to go back before?
If we
I
approve,
want to know kind of to the depth of what language.
I'm just saying clean up things like make pronouns work stylistically, make it consistent from bullet to bullet, that sort of thing, just so it all works together. I'm not talking about anything substantive. I'm purely talking about just cleaning up writing style.
Formatting. I think that.
I think what we
Mac,
have
you want to wait, I don't know if that.
I mean, if you're going to change this, I mean, you can change this from meeting to meeting. So if there are certain stylistic things you would like to amend, we can certainly amend it
clean it
now,
up.
or we
Okay.
can amend
All right,
those at the
just
next
wanted to
meeting.
check.
Well, I mean, I think I'd rather tackle the substance changes for now and
Absolutely.
leave stylistic changes for later.
Yep.
For example, the "and" you don't need, since you eliminated the last bullet point.
Yeah,
All right, do I have a motion,
so we don't need to do that since,
a motion to approve section 2?
the principles,
Principles of serving and standards of integrity.
so moved.
Second,
Second.
Second.
any discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, now we're into Article 1, organization. I think we can go to section 2.
Yeah, I have some things here.
All right,
We had talked, this came up at the town council meeting, inconsistency. The way our members are elected, the end date is January 31st. I think we should, because my biggest thing is going to be in the next section. But for this, I think it says appointments are 4 years duration, staggered in time so as to provide continuity, ending January 31st. Because in the website and everywhere, it gives the year we all get off, but it doesn't, you could look at it and say we're on until December. It's vague. I think the way the town council's been appointing, January 31st is the date, and it's going to come up in the next section as to why this is even more important. So I think we should add in there, appointments are for 4 years duration, staggered to provide continuity, ending on January 31st. And then I eliminated all the red stuff because I didn't see the need for that.
What did you eliminate?
Everything that's in red after that. I added,
Where did you add it? I'm sorry, you're just adding it, oh, I see, so you're eliminating all the red, you just want to add January 31st.
January 31st. This red wasn't in any of ours before, and I don't think it's needed.
I think the only factor that there are term limits. So I think that's what
Yeah, but that's done by the town council. I mean, we're limited to 3 terms.
So,
That's not part of our rules.
so again, the purpose of adding in the term limits in this particular document, again, is to, if a commissioner is not really looking at the municipal code or other documents on a regular basis, and so this provides direct interface with the documents that the planning commissioner would be more familiar with. And so I think having something tied to term limits, it's okay from a staff perspective. If you guys think it's redundant in capacity, then it can be removed. But that was the purpose of incorporating it so that no matter where we are, you can refer to the document and see that, hey, there are term limits associated with the planning commission service.
Are you all okay with adding the January 31st for clarity section?
I'm good with that, yeah.
yes.
I'm good with that.
And just to be clear, the
And I
proposed language is comma, ending January, and ending January 31st. So it would say members shall serve until successors are appointed.
No,
and-
they don't serve until successors are appointed.
I mean, excuse me, that was the next line. Appointments are for 4 years duration, staggered in time so as to provide continuity, and ending January 31st.
Yeah, and members
Correct.
shall not, you can't say they're going to serve until successors are appointed, because there are going to be instances where those members are not going to continue to serve. For example, if they're elected to town council, they can't continue to serve on the planning commission, so that should not be in there. They serve till January 31st, period. When they're done, whether they're replaced right away or not.
Well, that's what's being recommended.
It says members shall serve until successors are appointed and qualified. No.
Correct. So I'm just saying that would be correct in practice. What was being recommended is January 31st, where I hear there's no issues with commissioners
Yeah,
wanting
so you
31st.
so you have to take out that next line.
Yeah, I don't think I think that I heard general consensus there.
Okay.
And we're going to take out the section about term limits as well?
I think so.
Yes,
I don't
we
think we
do.
need it.
Right. Let's reference code if we need to, but
Right.
let's not include it in this document.
It's not necessary. Doesn't add anything, doesn't add any value.
All right. Do we need an amendment then for the changes?
I make a motion that we add, how did you phrase it, Mac? January 30th?
Yeah, just, we're adding to that sentence. It says, appointments are for 4 years duration, staggered in time so as to provide continuity, comma, and ending January 31st. And then it sounds like you're taking out and eliminating all of the other red line.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
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 All right, now we're down to the next red line,
The volunteer policy.
volunteer policy.
And that, I think, John, that's in reference to a comment that I made about adding a conflict of interest section to this when we had our telephone call.
So no, I actually could, yes, so no,
Okay.
that reference to, that would have been further down in the Article 2 section. This was just a reference to onboarding regarding the town's volunteer policy. Again, it's succincting all the living documents together. So what I'm hearing, if there's no desire by the commission to link all of our active and recurring documents, there are a couple of references throughout the rules of procedure, but that is another one of our, just referencing any other documents that touch anything relative to the planning commission, so that this particular document, as I said, is the most interface with the roles is seen there.
I'm fine removing that then, yeah.
Pardon me?
I'd be fine removing that paragraph about the volunteer policy, since it's redundant, like we were talking about the term limits in the preceding paragraph.
I'm fine with removing it. I don't have a strong preference either way.
No, I don't either. So amendment to remove members of the planning commission shall be governed by the town of Kiowa volunteer policy?
So you need a motion to remove it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so make it,
I'll do motion to remove the second paragraph under Section 2, Article 1 regarding members of the Planning Commission being governed by the volunteer requirements.
okay. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, Section 3, officers and election of officers.
Yeah, I've got some comments on this. First, the officers of the commission shall be a chair and a vice chair elected for 1 year term or until the officer's successor is elected, period. The next section makes no sense. Neither of these two positions shall be filled by that's taking away the judgment of whatever commissioners then in place. I removed that. I removed some other things. I've been thinking a lot about this, as I'm sure some of you know, and I've been thinking about how to comment on why we are doing this change of procedure, what precipitated it, what inconsistencies have happened over the past several years, and why we want them never to happen again. So I am going to briefly review just factually what happened and how we got here and why this change is important. We met last month, and there were some issues because we had 2 outgoing members who wanted to vote for the incoming leadership. There was some discussion on that, and because we did not have the language that we had in the preceding section about end dates, there was a little bit of conflict. In January of 2023, we were also down 2 members. We had 5 members present. Now, at that meeting, the 2 members who had left were not at the meeting. There were just 5 of us. it was decided then that the new members really should have a say in the leadership going forward. So there was a motion to table the election because it was in our January agenda, as it always had been, and it was tabled. An identical motion was made last month, and it was voted down 4-3. The reasons given, most vociferously by the two leaving members, was that the two new members were too new, didn't know anything, were not capable of making this decision. As one member inelegantly put it, said it would take them a year to find the bathroom. In February of 2023, our two new members were seated. Nobody gave it a second thought. We had our elections, and they all voted. One might ask why, and the same four people were here in 2023 as voted it last month. So one might ask why the new members, who happen to have been Misters Farrell and Curran, were deemed competent to vote, yet last month, Ms. Devine and Schmersel were deemed too inexperienced, not competent to make their vote. The end result of that was that of the 7 people sitting here today, only 2 actually participated in the vote. That we want to make sure never happens again, which is why to move forward, why we're changing this wording. So I took out, beginning on their first year of service, that doesn't matter. The election shall occur in February, period. At the end of the 3rd meeting, I don't know where that came from. That makes absolutely no sense at all, because those of us who've been involved know sometimes you cancel a meeting, your 3rd meeting could be in March or April or May, who knows. So I eliminated that. And also the red, after any incoming members being appointed and seated. No, February, period, because there will be occasions where, for example, if someone's elected to town council in January, which happened with the special election, we might not get that new member seated in February, and we shouldn't put off the elections because the officers are for 1 year, period. So it should just say February. If we have new members, great. If we don't, that's life. But whoever is seated here in February votes going forward. That starts next year. The terms of officers elected shall be effective once the chair declares each officer elected. If that's your language, Mac, I'm fine with that. But I think this fixes some of the problems.
I suggested the 3rd meeting just because that would be, so that the new members would, it wouldn't be their first meeting.
Doesn't matter. New members vote at the first meeting if they happen to be there. I know in the case of Ms. Devine and Ms. Schmersel, as you all well know, they have been attending our meeting for months. They've been coming to our meetings and workshops, and I think are totally capable. And the 2 new members in 2023, not both of whom had attended a lot of meetings, deemed themselves capable. So I think February makes sense.
I'd like to say too, I think February makes sense as well, because with our current configuration, our vice chair will be term limited as of the end of January. So I think February coincides nicely with putting a new officer in place. Otherwise we would have to come up with a vice chair solution up until March of next year, temporary.
Mr. Chair, if I may interject here, we do have invited guests, so I think this has been going a little longer than I thought we would go through the entire rules of procedure. So if we would recommend shifting to allow the discussion of the pervious paving, so we can at least have our guests present and share, and then I think come back to this particular agenda item. It's just a recommendation from staff, but it's a pleasure to commission.
So why don't we end this, why don't we finish with this section 3 and then make that, because we're right in the middle of it, I mean.
Yeah, we don't want to make you guys sit through all this stuff. Sorry about that.
Let's finish section 3. And so, Joanne, why don't you make your motion, and then we can get a second and vote on it.
Just for clear, again, some of this came from the Hilton Head Rules of Procedure. So the language about that the first year service shouldn't be one of the officers, that was from Hilton Head, so it wasn't out of the blue. So, so again, obviously different municipalities do things differently, but this isn't, John crafted this, again, after we reviewed that one, so.
Well, I still think it makes no sense because you have people coming in, you may have someone coming in to the Planning Commission who has, for example, spent a career in a totally unrelated field with no municipal experience, and that person probably wouldn't be elected, whereas you might have someone else come in who has had a lot of planning experience, done a lot of municipal work. I think the judgment of the 7 people at the time should rule. I don't think we should tie the hands of future commissions to say a new person can't serve, because there may be some very talented new people. We got a lot of talent on this island, and I think we should take advantage of it.
Okay. Why don't you
Yeah,
make
every commissioner is equal.
make your amendment?
I make a motion, this is how I think it should read. The officers of the commission shall be a chair and a vice chair elected for 1 term or until a successor is elected, period. The next sentence is eliminated. The next sentence, the election of the officers shall occur in February, period. Taking out at the 3rd meeting made no sense of the commission calendar year. And take out after any incoming members being appointed have been seated. Take that out.
The point of that, I think, is technically before they get brought on and appointed in February. I think you want the new members to vote on the next chairperson, because you technically could have the election of the new chair at the beginning of the February meeting before the new members are sworn in.
The new members are appointed at the town council meeting, which is the
Right.
day before the planning commission meeting. If they're not appointed till March, then they're not going to vote in February, but February is the date.
Okay.
Like Sandy and Mary Beth are here.
No, I
If we
think
had
what-
tabled the motion, which some of us wanted to do, it would have happened today.
That language, to Mike's point, was added for that concern of ensuring that the new members would be able to vote after they're seated. So that's why that was added.
But they're going to, if terms end January 31st, the town does Brad want to weigh in on this?
I just would want to point out that I showed this to council, just so everybody understands, as I read the state.
We can't hear on Zoom, sorry. Thank you.
Not making any substantive comment at all. I just want to note that as a matter of the state statute, it does say that members remain in their positions until their successors are duly appointed and qualified. So in that instance, at least as I read state statute, council may have a different view, is their term may be up January 31, but if for whatever reason the council, which is the appointing authority for new members, a meeting is canceled in February and they don't get to do the appointment till March, that the incumbent would remain in their position. It doesn't create a vacancy until the successor is actually appointed and qualified.
How does that jive with people who, for whatever reason, retire, something comes up, that we've had people who've moved, people who've been elected?
That creates a vacancy. So there is a provision that deals with replacing a vacancy, filling a vacancy in the same manner as the original appointment was made. Because all I'm saying is what state statute says pretty clearly is they're for a term, but they don't go away if their successor hasn't yet been appointed and duly qualified.
That's going to bump up against if you're at the end of your last term and your term limited, you can't go on. That opens up a whole can of worms. Can we, as our rules of procedure, say this is the way we're going to do it?
I'm going to defer to council. I just want to make sure
Yeah,
that
because
the
otherwise
state
I can
statute.
foresee a lot of issues. That opens up a can of worms that I think we want to be consistent. Again, because of what happened last month, we have not been consistent over the years, and it has caused, we want to avoid those problems going forward.
All I'm
Thank you,
passing
Brad.
along is the provision of state statute.
Yeah, I mean, potentially a way to do it is at the first meeting where any incoming members being appointed have been seated.
But
Because
then you
to
can
Brad's
have
point, if
the-
it's snow, like if we have the snow like we just had, town council doesn't meet, the new members aren't appointed, and you have your February meeting, then what happened this year is going to happen that same year.
Except that the term of the chair is 1 year, period. They don't get to extend until the new meeting. Their term is 1 year, so you have to have an election in February. If their term ends the end of January, you have to have an election.
So Joanne, I think you're saying the member remains seated, but not in the position or capacity of chair.
But what about, for example, sorry, Larry, I'm not picking on you, but you term out the end of January. What if they,
Thank
you're-
God.
you are
Thank goodness.
irreplaceable, we know that. But let's say they don't replace it, he can't continue beyond his term limit.
As officer or
As
in
anything.
general?
In general, he's term limited. Term limits
Right.
are term limits. You don't get to, a governor who's term limited doesn't get to keep serving if something goes wrong with an election.
So there would just be a vacancy for that seat, so it.
Yeah, which is okay. So I think we do it this way, and if someone wants to, I don't think, I'll let the lawyers work, but I don't think we're breaking any laws. I think we're a self-governing body. We're trying to create some consistency here so everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah, I don't think you're breaking any laws by eliminating that.
Good.
But the policy reason behind this change may not play out if, for example, town council doesn't appoint somebody before the February meeting, then the new members won't have a say in who the next chair is.
Which has happened many times over the years, and it was forced last month. They should have had a say, but they didn't. So
Well-
that's what we're trying to, sorry, go ahead, Mary Beth, you have?
I was just going to say, in a situation like that, couldn't that be tabled, the election, until the next meeting?
We
tried.
tried.
I know we tried, but I'm just saying, if everything's written clearly this way, and that's the intent, we might have a better case for tabling in the future.
Yes, if, let's say, sorry, we lose someone who's termed out next year, the appointment isn't made in February, the 6 people who remain can decide, they can make that decision to table the election. That'll be, although the term limit of the chair is still a year. Which I guess we screwed up 2 years ago, too.
So did we ever finish the amendment that you were working through?
I did.
So
Yeah,
election
so,
of officers shall occur at the February meeting of the commission,
Yes.
Yes,
and then everything after that's deleted?
yes,
Except the town clerk.
town clerk.
Yeah.
And a second for that amendment?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
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 Okay, we're through that section. So staff has asked us to move to the pervious zoning text amendment for our experts that are here, our guests. John?
So do we have to pause do we have to make a motion to pause this now because we've got an emotion?
Oh, there's a motion on the floor, you're right.
Do we have to pause it now and then come back to, can we do that or?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think technically by procedure, yes, you're right. We have to make okay, so I'll make a motion that we pause discussion of the rules of procedure to redo it after we're done with some other business.
Second.
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 Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Now we're going to move, John, to zoning text amendment.
Yeah, Patricia's going to lead most of this, but what I just wanted to do is recap. This has been with town council, as you all recall, and it was remanded back to the planning commission, and we deferred action based on your recommendation to engage with the private sector regarding installation, maintenance, cost, factors, and implications. So today is just an opportunity for you guys to engage with some of the private sector and hopefully move this ordinance along just based on your discussion. So, Trigger.
Okay, I am just going to go really quickly recap just a little bit for our guests to understand kind of how we got here. So this has been in discussion, I believe, since June of last year. And this all started even before that at the Marsh Management Committee. And I believe they've been talking about it probably for about 9 months before that. It was a recommendation that was part of the Marsh Management Plan, also part of the flood mitigation and sea level rise adaptation, the Nature-Based Solutions Manual for Kiowa Island, which was put out by the Conservancy. And then it's also part of a low-impact development in coastal South Carolina planning and design guideline, which is more of a regional guideline. So part of this comes from all that basis. It didn't really just happen. And one of the possible benefits to consider with this is that it can eventually count towards the CRS credits, which are the community rating credit system for FEMA score for flooding and such. So that impacts homeowners insurance and such. So this is kind of a reference handout that was provided by Lee. Unfortunately, Lee Bundrick from the Conservancy couldn't be here. He's out of town. And I thought it was a pretty good synopsis of some of the research that he's done as to where we are in terms of impervious surfaces. Right now, we're at 18% impervious surfaces. This is part of kind of what's driving the idea behind the ordinance. He had also gone around, you probably can't see it out there, but he actually did do a permeability test on a number of projects in Kiowa that have been done, including pervious concrete, pervious pavers, two kinds of pervious pavers, and pea gravel to do the test of how effective those are from a permeable point of view. So that's kind of, so just a real quick summary of all of the research and references that they have been doing working with us. So we're currently at 18% impervious cover. The next threshold for ecological impacts is 20%. And so we're about 70 acres from that threshold. So, and there's this whole additional PowerPoint behind this in terms of his analysis that was presented, I believe, back in September. So if we look at the residential build out, they're looking at approximately 19.5% impervious cover, just for residential, not including commercial development. So that's the impetus for this ordinance. So pervious paving. So again, this kind of we've talked about since about July, and we looked at costs. In fact, we got some costs from local contractors in this, and I would like to dispel some of the thoughts that this can equal up to 2 times the cost of a pervious paving. In terms of pervious concrete paver, that's why I really want to talk about differential cost, because there's all kinds of choices for impervious paving systems. So pervious concrete pavers, the cost differential is negligible. It's pretty much the same, but it is the highest cost of any of the selections that we look at. So there's pervious paving systems that include plastic cells and prefab panels, We haven't really seen much of this in Kiowa. They're still developing a bunch of different kinds of. This is not just occurring here. A number of communities are looking at this, especially impacted by flooding. This is actually on the island. It's pervious concrete drive. I wanted to show this in particular because it's a very attractive drive and it's pervious. So the cost differential between conventional asphalt and pervious asphalt is about $2 a square foot. The cost differential between conventional concrete, now there is a range in conventional concrete depending on what the materials and the finish are, being from $7 to $11 a square foot. The cost is approximately for pervious concrete is $11.50 a square foot. These are all like point in time kind of costs, but just to show that it's a differential. Soft materials with edgings are also a choice. The plantation mix up in the corner, that's actually at the farm stand down at the Kiowa River Estates. And then the pea gravel, and those also have costs, the plantation mix being about $4.25 a square foot with $16 linear foot steel edging, and pea gravel, $6.75 a square foot, also using the steel edging just to contain the material. So how did we get here? As I mentioned, the flood mitigation study, the resiliency amendments from the 2019 comprehensive marsh management plan, town council retreat. There was also a major discussion about, are there incentives that we can provide? How can we encourage this? The Planning Commission recommendation of approval occurred back in July of 2024. We held a stormwater resiliency workshop on September 30th that also talked extensively about this, as well as stormwater management. There was a public hearing and first reading of this ordinance back in November at Town Council. So the second reading was when it came up about whether or not to include driveways in this ordinance. And we needed to go back to Planning Commission and get their recommendation. And I believe this ordinance, John, was also shared when you had the meeting with the Charleston Home Builders Association in January 27th. So that brings us today. We've also been working, I think education is a real key part of this. We've been working with KICA as well as the ARB. Currently now, when we review any driveway renewal or replacement, we add the comment, please consider pervious paving, as it has proven to help with drainage and flooding. I'm going the same way. One thing that came up previously from KICA was some concern about the durability of some pervious paving under heavy truck traffic or surface traffic. So one of the thoughts and one of the things we included in this revised ordinance is a line that allows for a designated service drive and loading zone, which shall be identified during the site plan process, be exempt, and may use impervious service material. So where you have those heavy trucks driving and unloading, then that would be exempt from using the pervious paving. And just as an example is a sketch of the sandcastle showing how you would designate a service drive and the loading area.
I think that was amended so that the service drive would actually incorporate the exit lane as well.
Right, and I think the point is that when they come, whoever comes through site plan, they can identify their service drive based on how their trucks come and go and deliver materials. So that's kind of a quick update.
Yeah, Trey, a question is that basically I'm looking at the numbers that you provided us. First time we've seen them, by the way, is essentially, except if you some pervious pavers are obviously more expensive, but for the standpoint, the range of expenses is not that much. But this is all for a brand-new driveway, right? When you're starting from,
Correct.
okay. If you, and are we only talking about new driveways in this text, or?
Well, I think based on the discussion from the last meeting that you had about this, I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were talking about, so town council wanted to exclude driveways. And my recollection of what you guys discussed at the special meeting was to put the driveways back in. So it's at the purview
Okay, but
of
I
you
see that.
guys.
The question I have, the specific question I have is that if this is not replacement driveways, because because I'm wondering if there's an additional cost if you're moving from a asphalt or concrete driving to a pervious driving, is there a prep cost that is going to?
I would suspect it would actually be less because you already have a base generally. But one of the reasons we have our contractors here is to open the floor to questions. And we have contractors from 3 different entities that work on the island. So if you want to open questions, I have questions if you are shy.
No, I mean, if they can just validate that there's no difference in cost and prep work if you're replacing a driveway. But we're not talking about replacement at this point, is that correct?
No, we are.
We are, we're talking
We
about
are,
replacement
we are.
driveways too. So that would be an important piece of information for me.
So that was the conclusion from the last meeting was, there was I think, pretty much a consensus that we should include driveways and replacement driveways.
Okay,
Yes.
but then if there's a difference in cost and preparation work, then I think we should know that.
Yeah, I know the soft materials thing was an issue, because I was talking with John Connolly about it, and in his neighborhood, I guess everything had been pea gravel. And when some people went to replace it, it really made a difference whether they had the steel edging, because otherwise the stuff goes all over.
A friend of mine did the same thing.
Yeah, so the edging is very important if you're going with soft
And you can
material.
use different kinds of edging. You can use pavers as edging, a concrete curb as an edging.
So we'd like to hear from our guests, experts. I'm not, you each want to come up and tell us your
You wanna
experience?
start?
Your experience
Can
with
you introduce yourself?
pervious driveways?
Yes, sir.
Pervious parking?
Yes.
Give us your expertise let us know as far as what you perceive as cost differential. Also how durable they are, what maintenance they require.
Okay.
So,
I mostly deal in pavers.
Who are you?
My name's Pete Ambrose. I own Leadmall Landscapes. I've been working on Kewall for 15, 20 years. I mostly deal with pavers, so I'm gonna stay in my lane. I know the other contractors deal a lot with pervious concrete and pervious asphalt. I mostly deal with paver bricks, pervious pavers, and non-pervious pavers. So I think the biggest cost with the pervious pavers that people don't understand is the labor. So if you have a concrete driveway, which is normally 4 inches thick, and you want to pull that concrete driveway out, you have to first remove the concrete driveway, dispose of it. Then you have to take and dig down another 8 to 12 inches, depending on what the specs are. Each architect specs them a little differently. And then you have to add granite rock, which is very expensive. You have to truck it in. And I think that's the biggest cost of the pervious pavers against a non-pervious paver. Is non-pervious pavers, you could possibly use some of the base that's there or replace it with a small amount of base. But when you go to pervious pavers, it takes such a big area of gravel to make it actual pervious underneath the paver, you know? And that's the biggest cost. It's not there is a little more cost in a pervious paver versus a regular paver, but it's the paver cost is not the expense that people are spending. It's the labor and the cost of the granite underneath the pavers that you don't see.
And what would that cost be roughly?
I mean, a pervious driveway, usually, I don't do any pervious stuff that's under $20 a square foot. I mean, that's like the baseline for pervious, which probably the baseline for a non-pervious would be like around $16 a square foot.
And those
it's-
costs are all in, right, Pete?
Yeah, that's like all in removal. Sometimes the removal is not in there. A lot of times the removal is an additional cost, and that all depends on what you're removing. Asphalt, which is usually 2 inches thick, or concrete, which can be 4 or 6 inches thick. There's a lot of differences, you know, in the removal, but all in cost for installing the pavers is around,
5%
yeah,
upcharge.
yeah.
And in terms of the maintenance for pervious versus non-pervious, lots of information out there in terms of, it doesn't need annual maintenance, cleaning to maintain its permeability, things like that.
Well,
What do you see with the stuff you've done?
when you install the pervious pavers, there's a gap between them that's filled with only gravel. Once you blow leaves, you move stuff around your yard, the dirt fills in those gaps, it turns into completely non-pervious material after a year or 2 or 3 if you don't keep it up. You have to do some maintenance. I mean, there's all kind of ways to maintain it, vacuuming out the cracks between them. I mean, there is maintenance required. I don't know the costs. I mean, all places are different. I mean, if you have somebody that blows a lot of leaves into their driveway, they're going to need to maintain it more than somebody that doesn't have any leaves to blow in their driveway or something like that. There's all kind of ways that the maintenance can be more or less on a property, but there is always going to be maintenance on a pervious driveway if you wanted to keep it pervious,
Who does that work?
Characteristics.
So,
I
so
don't
did I
know.
hear that correctly? It becomes impervious if the maintenance doesn't happen?
Say that again?
Did I hear you correctly that a driveway that's put in as a pervious driveway becomes impervious if the maintenance isn't kept to the proper standards?
Yes.
For the pervious paving,
Yes, for the pervious pavement, for the pervious
concrete pavers.
concrete pavers, yeah.
We're just talking pavers, not pervious
Yeah.
concrete or asphalt.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same with concrete and asphalt, I believe. I mean, fines, sand, everything, as soon as it gets into the porous cracks that are in there, it's gonna turn it into non-pervious material.
The recommendations I've seen suggest vacuuming it once a year. So you get like with these regimes, it works really well because the regime can schedule a vacuum truck, come vacuum it once a year, and it maintains the permeability.
Yeah, there is people that do the work. I don't know who they are, but there is companies out there that focus on that, I think.
And in terms of durability, when you have a pervious base versus non-pervious base, is one more sensitive to weight and crowning on a driveway than the other, or do they both kind of stand the test of time?
If they're installed correctly, neither of them should matter what kind of weight you put on them. I mean, pervious pavers have a lot more base under them. It is pervious, but they're also, all pervious pavers are 90 millimeter pavers, which are a third thicker than all the other pavers. When you go to a pervious paver, it's a thicker paver compared to a non-pervious paver. And that's so that the gravel between the two has a bigger surface area to lock the pavers together. So, I mean, I don't personally think there's any difference.
Oh, go ahead, sorry. I was going to ask about durability of the pavers versus conventional concrete asphalt type settings. Does it stand up the same?
Well, yeah, I mean, they both, concrete's gonna crack no matter what you put out there. No matter if it's pervious concrete, regular concrete, eventually, concrete is gonna crack. So, I mean, they all hold up the same. Pavers are also gonna move, but, they all hold up the same, I think, in the long run.
Would you like to join? I know you work with pavers as well.
Hi, guys. My name is Ryan. I'm with Three Creek. We are a design and installation company dealing with permeable pavers, standard pavers, concrete, turf. We kind of do the whole nine as a design company. Respectfully, going to disagree with a couple things. Just as far as the thickness of the paver, a standard residential paver, whether it's going to be permeable or impervious, is going to be a 60 millimeter paver. That's a 2 1/4 inch. They do make larger pavers. So for example, an 80 millimeter or 110 millimeter, which is actually going back to the question about, hey, can we allow commercial heavy trucks on some of these pavers? Yes, as long as you get a thicker paver. 110 millimeter paver will withstand some of the larger commercial trucks that will be running in and out. But a standard residential paver is going to be 2 1/4 inches, and that does exist in both permeable and non-permeable. As far as the lines in between, or the spaces, excuse me, and filling up and going over maintenance, I actually would disagree that it gets impermeable over time. At the end of the day, you know, when you're looking at a permeable foundation, you're looking at what's considered an open aggregate foundation. That's a 57 stone, 789 stone. Numbers or sizes, the whole point is that it's a river rock, right? So when water flows across a river, it flows across very readily. For drainage, we want to go north and south. That's the whole point of it. So as some of those granular fines get into those cracks, rain, water, things like that will ultimately push those down. And occasionally you can get some compaction with some different weather circumstances, hurricanes, but over time that stuff withers away. There's not a ton of maintenance on some of these impervious pavers. Conversely, in relation to actual standard pavers, you're going to have what's called polymeric sand. So that's a standard paver sand that when mixed with water inside the cracks of pavers expands, and that's what interlocks them. So pavers themselves are not interlocking themselves. It requires that polymeric sand. Usually there's more maintenance with that, having to put that back in over time, than there is with a standard fill on a permeable paver, which is going to be some type of 789 stone, a smaller type of rock, or an aqua stone that's even smaller. So a lot of those granular fines that can get into the gaps, those will end up trickling down all the way to the bottom of that rock. So there was a question as well about the demo and whether removing an existing driveway adds cost to a permeable install. It does not. Essentially, that cost is isolated as a demo. If miraculously there was some 57 stone placed under a concrete driveway years and years ago, God bless it, you can use it again. But you know, for the most part, none of the driveways are going to have that. Here in the south, that's usually a north thing. So you are essentially replacing everything underneath an existing asphalt or concrete or just like a standard slag driveway. And then I think there was a question on whether or not to include driveways in this proposal. If I may, if you're going to go through the process of trying to do this, I would say the driveway has to be the thing you do include, simply because, I mentioned you're adding all of that open aggregate foundation. The bulk of the driveways you're going to run into are 1,500 to 2,500 square feet. So if you can imagine 6 inches, which is a standard residential foundation with a 2 1/4 inch paver on top. So you got 6 inches of now cubic area to collect all of that water. It is a massive difference. So I would say if you're going to go through the process of this, But those 1,500 to 2,500 square foot areas, that's going to be a massive difference in the amount of rainwater you can actually collect.
Thank you. Sure. Any other questions?
When you, Ryan, when you were commenting on the thickness of the pavers, and you made a comment that one is more durable to heavy traffic than the residential 2¼ inch paver. Are you referring to the durability of the paver itself, or the paver and the underlayment and all that?
Yeah, so
Would the thinner paver crack essentially with the heavy truck traffic, or is it just the foundation?
Yeah, brings up a good question, and you mentioned durability. I would also argue too, just as far as the foundations is concerned, if we are talking about pavers specifically, the durability of a permeable installation is going to be better than that of a standard paver install. Reason being is because, again, to reiterate, as a permeable installation, you're adding an open aggregate foundation. In a standard paver installation, there's going to be some installers that will utilize what's called a crush and run, essentially just a dirty gravel, and then a masonry sand. That's our bedding layer. The problem sometimes with that, in the low country especially, is when water sits in sand, sand erodes. So if you've ever seen your family, friends, neighbors that have undulation in their pavers, it's usually because the sand has eroded out from underneath. And so conversely, if on a permeable installation, we're compacting at every 2 inches. Every 2 inches. So you've got multiple instances of really hardened gravel. And if I lay a paver on that, there's no sand for it to erode. It's not going anywhere. To give you an idea of this 57 stone and 789 stone, that is sometimes used in foundations as a bedding rock to then put your footers on. So as far as the durability goes, it's better in a vacuum than a standard paver install. As far as the pavers themselves, you mentioned the commercial specifically. There's manufacturers that will actually offer a lifetime warranty on some of this stuff. So there's manufacturers that will put their name behind the product like that at 110 millimeters, they'll be able to hold up a commercial vehicle. So as far as just the standard size pavers, there's no real difference in the durability of the paver itself versus an impervious paver. So I don't really think that there's much there. Again, the biggest thing is you'll often find that there's differences in the type of paver that you install. So there's dry cast, wet cast, not to bore you with some of the semantics there, but some of the lower cost pavers are going to be dry cast. Those have a higher probability of breaking than a wet cast. That being said, on a 60 millimeter residential driveway, by God, you're going to be fine. And if you do have any issues in cracking, there's manufacturers out there that will provide a lifetime warranty on those cracks. You got to work hard to crack some of these pavers. These are manufactured at a 6,000 PSI. So to give you an idea, when you're installing concrete, most of the installs here in the South are going to be 3,000 PSI, pounds per square inch. That's how we measure the structural and tensile strength of concrete. These are manufactured at 6,000 PSI. Yes, they're slightly skinnier at 2¼ inches versus 4 inches, but in a vacuum, they are going to be more durable than concrete.
Any other questions?
I have one. Ryan, you've spoken quite a lot about pavers, but do you have much experience with pervious concrete and asphalt?
Yeah, so pervious concrete, it's one of those things, at least in the United States, has not caught on a ton. There's not a lot of crews out there that can even make a living off of doing pervious concrete. Usually how it typically happens is somebody knows a cousin who's done a couple of those installs before, and, they know how to do them. But it's just not something that people do here in the States regularly.
Okay.
I used to work for a national concrete manufacturer covering 25 locations. The amount of pervious concrete that we actually did was super small in comparison. So the difference between pervious concrete and standard concrete is essentially they just take the smaller fines out of the actual concrete.
Okay.
The smaller fines out of the concrete. That's the biggest difference.
Is it completely pervious then, or is it partially pervious, or is that even how we talk about this?
Based on the testing done by Lee with the Conservancy, it was actually more effective pervious than the pavers in terms of how quickly the water went through.
Okay. Thank you. And asphalt, do we use that in the States much? Pervious asphalt?
God's honest truth, we do not do asphalt, so I can't speak confidently on any of that.
Okay, thank you.
And Ryan, I've heard that the pervious concrete, hearsay and innuendo, that there's a durability issue with it because of the pores and driving over and it crumbling and things like that. What's your perspective on that?
So yes, pervious concrete does not have the strength of standard concrete, simply because you are taking those fines out that do help in regular concrete to compact and give that tensile strength, right? So when concrete cracks, a lot of it is because you've got foundation issues underneath, microfractures develop, but those small fines help to keep those microfractures intact. Whereas if you take those small fines out on a pervious install, once those cracks happen, boom, they happen, because they're not being able to be contained because there's a lack of tensile strength.
Any idea how quickly it degrades, or is it really, it sounds like it's based on individual?
Yeah, it's tough to say, and a lot of it has to do with, one, the environment, the foundation, what you're actually putting on it. I would say, take the standard life of concrete and chop it by 30, 40%.
Okay.
Just as more probable to crack than standard concrete.
Makes sense, yep.
Thank you. Sure. You have a comment or question? No, go ahead.
No, I thought, no, we have
Did you
one
want a
more.
question, or? No. Oh, okay, by all means.
My name's Robert Todd with Three Oaks Contractors. I agree with both of what they said and disagree a little bit, but my background predominantly is in road building and that nature of things with asphalt and concrete. I've learned a great deal about pervious pavers, but the pervious concrete, because it is porous, water is it's going to go where it's going to go. So when you have porous concrete, or asphalt for that matter, the tree roots, which cause the most damage, are going to follow the water, and they're going to destroy the driveways quicker than anything out here. But they also are, once the fines and all get in there, because I did a pervious pad out at Folly Beach for ADA ramp for a bathroom out there at one of the boardwalks. Within 2 weeks, it was completely covered with sand, and it was completely impervious. So I get where the notion is good to do that. You live on an island here. The water table is extremely high or low because you're closer to sea level. So, but it also, the water perks through the yard, everything a lot faster here than it does, say, up at Nexton, where you have a lot more clayey soils. it does have benefits, and I have used it at apartment complexes where people are trying to achieve, the certain percentage of impervious versus pervious, areas. Interstate, the top layer is pervious asphalt. That's so the water drains through the first 2 inches. It's the second layer, and then it runs out, over the shoulder. The interstates are different than the beaches out here. You've got, like Petey said, you've got sand, you've got sediment, you have trees. I mean, it essentially will sheet flow off after, I don't even know if I'd give it 2 years. It's gonna sheet flow and act almost as an impervious surface from my personal and professional, applications over the last 12 years and what I've seen and what I've done. Pervious pavers do have their benefits, but I think and whichever one of y'all asked about cost, one of the first jobs I bid out here when I joined Three Oaks was a job on Governor's Drive. And the cost to demo and replace the existing driveway was about $50,000. To do a pervious paver was about $75,000, because you do have, the layer of 57s, you do have the layer of 789s, and then you have the pavers on top. So there is a lot more material, a lot more labor, there's excavation, that kind of thing. But again, your island is sandy and it is pervious. So even in my opinion, if you have an impervious driveway and the water sheds off to the side, the soil out here is so sandy that it's ultimately going to filter under the driveway to the sandy perviousness underneath it. And you're not going to have the deterioration of the standard concrete driveway that you would with a pervious concrete or pervious asphalt. And pervious asphalt is extremely expensive compared to, asphalt's more expensive than concrete in general, and pervious is even more expensive. And again, out here, I just do not see it being as an effective alternative to make everybody have to go that direction. Y'all have given people incentives. I think if you go this impervious area, we'll give you, impervious here, we'll give you a little more impervious, areas elsewhere. I think if you want to go the route of instituting or mandating the pervious, you start with the construction, the retail areas and things like that as they demo and replace, because that's a much bigger volume of area and the cost can be absorbed a lot easier by, say, Night Heron Park or Sandcastle or something like that, versus the individual homeowner with the initial install and then the maintenance cost, which ultimately is going to wind up being impervious out here. Again, somewhere like Nexton or up that way where you have a lot clayer soils and it's not going to infiltrate the gaps in the pavers or the pervious concrete or asphalt as it does out here on the island.
Any questions?
I'm just wondering, do you see people doing other applications, drainage ditches, drains at the end of driveways to kind of mirror what they get from a pervious application, or?
Well, and that is another alternative. There's a house I just did out off of High Dunes. In order to help mitigate runoff, we installed dry wells around the property. We tied the gutter system into, under, the roof drains, underground detention, and then there were 3 dry wells throughout the property, which essentially is helping offset the runoff. And they're, typically 3 by 3 by 3, and it's filled with 57 fabric and 57's granite. And it, hopefully the water will go through there and perk through. But there again, the water table is so high or low, depending on how you want to look at it. Hydraulic, once the water equalizes, it equalizes. And that's what we tell people when we install drainage in their yards and we tie into the golf course or whatever, the road. It's like, I tell them, I say, we can't eliminate the flooding in your yard, but we can definitely help mitigate it, because the water is, once it equalizes with the tide or whatever, the level of the ponds, it's only going to go so far until the tide cycle drops and then drains the system. But where we live, it's difficult to say 100%, yes, this is going to fix everything. That's why I say with some of the bigger commercial projects, if you want to implement it, I think that's where it would be most beneficial. But to impose that on the individual homeowners is, I think, a maintenance, a cost, and just, they're going to look for other alternatives and displace water elsewhere. But again, water's going, roots in that nature of things are going to follow water. And you give them the entire pervious driveway, whether it be pavers, concrete, or asphalt, I think it's going to create a lot more maintenance for the homeowners. And then the flip side is, how many owners are going to defer maintenance because it's going to cost more to fix it, or because they like a concrete driveway and they don't want to fix it because they have no other option but to go pervious. So are they going to defer maintenance until they sell the house, or somebody makes them, comes and makes them replace it? Just something to think about there.
Okay.
Mr. Bernard?
Sir, thank you.
All right, Russell Berner, 286 Masters Court. I'm speaking as a licensed professional engineer, not as a town council person. From my own personal experience on Superfund sites, where we had to deal with the migration of nasty chemicals into the groundwater, did a lot of work along the Mississippi River. The reason I'm bringing that up, I wanted you guys to understand the behavioral characteristics of liquids or water. Water follows the path of least resistance, just like you were hearing just recently with the last gentleman. In areas of a high water table, water or any liquid will flow downward until it hits the water table, and it's going to then start piling up like a bathtub, and then it's going to start going laterally because it can't go down. The ground beneath it is saturated. At that point, because driveways are relatively narrow and skinny, it's going to go into your driveway. So any water that sheds to the sides off the driveway is eventually going to go underneath the driveway, the same place where all of these porous pavers or concrete is going to go. So at the end of the day, you're going to wind up with the same measure or same effect when you're going to have the big storms that we're all worried about. Now, that was my opinion and personal experience about the behavioral characteristics of water. I just also now want to be just citing things from the internet, all right, non-personal appearing, although it is also my experience, I just want to cite these things to you. In order for any of these materials that we're talking about to work in a permeable manner, you have to have a way for water to go through them. That means they have holes. Concrete has holes, just like you had. The only way you make permeable concrete, you get rid of the small fines. All the driveways we have outside here in the walkway and in my own driveway, they have a lot of small fines to hold it together. It's permeable because you get rid of the small fines. And what happens, it looks more like a sponge because it has a lot of holes in it, right? But what happens is, because we live here in a sandy environment, we have sand. In these kinds of environment, from website of concretebiz.com, the problem is not the problem, it's the additional cost that you're not hearing about. Maintenance, you have to use a high pressure power washer in order to clean the pavers and or concrete multiple times a year. You have to frequently inspect for clogging because materials will clog, whether it's the joints between the pavers or whether it's permeable concrete. For pavers, they suggest pressure washing 1 to 2 times a year to remove sediment. And you need to keep piles of yard waste and mulch and sand and whatever, all these other items off your driveway. This is what the internet is saying for these kinds of, you have to keep it off the driveway. Because we live in this environment, we track sand into the house just by walking around. This is where we live. Same thing's gonna happen in these kinds of permeable things. So the reason I'm bringing it up is because the cost is not just simply the installation. I have a new concrete driveway at home. I don't touch it, right? It's there. I have a permeable concrete driveway. I have costs. So the life cycle costs of a permeable concrete or paver design has to be factored in when somebody's looking at, or somebody is telling you what the cost of the installation is. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Just real quick, guys, just on the, as far as the subject of maintenance keeps coming up, with permeable pavers being trendy, a lot of islands have adopted the same statute that you guys are looking to. There's been an increase in technology about how to go about some of this stuff. And as far as protecting the joints, if a customer is wanting to go overboard with that, you actually can. There's resin sand that you can put in between. It is an extra cost, but if you're trying to dilute some of the maintenance worries, resin sand can be put in place. And essentially it mimics a polymeric sand. Polymeric sand has a different point, but essentially a resin sand can replace that, and essentially it hardens in between the joints, but it still allows some water to get through.
So,
Differing opinions.
so it's very clear, right?
Thanks for clearing it up.
So I think the idea is that we need to come to a recommendation
Sure.
for council.
Are we wanting to amend the zoning ordinance?
I've been listening to all this and not being an expert on it and listening to different opinions. Should we include driveways? You know, I wish Lee were here because he talked about the total amount of the driveway and the percentage and how that's going to impact. But listening, it's going to run off the driveway, but the sandy surface is only going to hold it so much, and the roots and it's going to go under the driveway versus let's just do commercial properties. I don't know how you all feel. Are we ready to make a firm recommendation on this?
No.
I'm sort of, I'm trying to hear all sides of it, and I don't feel
I guess I would say.
When I made my initial motion to table this back in December, I think that time I was saying I want to get these experts together as well as Lee to get an objective opinion on the effectiveness, the maintenance, and all that associated with the permeable pavers and other products. Personally, I'd really like to have somebody like Lee present to us to hear that objective opinion on the merits of each of these products before we make a decision. That's my view.
So I see Madeline in the back of the room, and I know Madeline was a very key member of the marsh management study. And part of the reasons we're looking at things like this is because, you know, first of all, let's all acknowledge the fact that we got an existential problem with water on the island. So that's assumed. So we're looking for solutions, and the marsh management study, this was one of the items that they wanted us to consider. So I've been moving along thinking, okay, the marsh management did a lot of study. Now we're starting to get some considerations. So it's not a straight slam dunk. There are trade-offs. Now, are we willing to make those trade-offs yet? I don't think I am.
Well,
Madeline, could you give us your opinion? Is that okay?
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah. Because you're closer to this, I know, than most of us.
I want to thank the folks who came to present today. And you're right, Larry, Iwan Rise with Taiwan. It was one of the recommendations out of the Comprehensive Marsh Management Plan. I said this yesterday, this is a complicated issue. I'm here today because I wanted to hear the three, at least what these three different companies had to say, because I'm still in information gathering mode as well. And Russ has made some very interesting observations from a professional and technical perspective. I think the suggestion that was made that we have some workshops that either Lee attends or get a lot more folks representation from this particular industry that's servicing our community, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not at a place yet where I'm comfortable with my level of knowledge to make a really good informed decision. So if you guys are all in the same boat, I think it's probably best to defer.
Was I right in assuming that this came as a recommendation from the Marsh Management?
That was, well, that and the sea level rise
Okay,
report
that's true, too.
goes back to 1718.
Yeah.
2017, 2018. So there have been several different studies that have suggested this kind of approach, along with the other things that you see going on, like at Mingo and a bunch of different marsh management initiatives. But this was a big piece of it. I appreciate your citing the origins. Again, I'm not at a point yet where I feel real comfortable making a strong recommendation or as a council member voting on which is the best approach. I like that you guys are collecting more information that we can all benefit from.
Well, based on that, I would make the recommendation.
Let me,
Go ahead.
so one other alternative would be for us to, again, leave driveways off and move ahead with this for parking. So multifamily parking or commercial parking. So that would be another alternative rather than table the whole thing. We could move ahead, eliminate driveways and replacement driveways, which was, I believe the town council's recommendation, but still move ahead with parking. So that would be another alternative.
I think, though, that might create some issues for some of the bigger regimes, the Parksides or Mariners Watch, where they have big parking surfaces and they'd be pulled into this while single-family homes would not be.
Yeah, that's true, too.
I wonder if at some point we need to look at this also from a little bit of a business perspective and where we have heavier lot coverage, because the way we manage water there might even be more important. But it looks to me like we really only have pea gravel, plantation gravel, and pavers as options for pervious surfaces. So we've got a really narrow band of what we can do. And we have a narrow band of providers because of that. So I do wonder, is there capacity out there to implement this if we've got some large scale projects that need to happen in a narrow amount of time?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the other thing is, to go to Jean's comment, you know, we obviously did this tree and landscape and we excluded single-family homes and only left it for multifamily or commercial. And while, I mean, you could say that was unfair to those sites, but I bring that up as an alternative. Because I think that's, you know, again, driveways make up 3.2% or something, I think, according to Lee's data that he presented to us so, I mean, it's a significant percentage, but it's obviously much less than the buildings and parking lots, so.
If you think about it, the commercial areas have curb and gutters and stuff to handle the commercial and Mayor's Watch. They have these storm structures and systems in place, the curb and gutter, to handle the runoff and direct it somewhere. where again, individual driveways, it's gonna run off the side and perk through.
You can always also do like any crosswalks on streets that are that stamped asphalt, you could change those to pervious to help, I mean, instead of just parking areas, I mean, there's plenty of states and places that use a lot of pavers in the streets. I mean, you can also do that.
Well, that was brought up, I think, by Mary Beth, is, why are we not looking at some of these other trails and golf cart paths and things like that, where it would be an obvious, use of more pervious surfaces.
Oh, what about the neighborhood that's already done this? We should have them come talk to us.
Ocean Woods?
Yeah. Tell us what they've done and how it's worked.
So can we?
Yeah, I think Ocean Woods was included in the analysis that Lee did.
Right.
How permeable it's maintaining, so I'm sure we get Gene in here easily.
So we had a couple. So first of all, we heard from Amanda and from some of the other contractors saying, you need to get us more involved. We haven't been involved enough. So number one. Number two, we've got the marsh management people saying that, hey, wait a minute, we need to take a step back because this is more complicated than it appeared when we made the recommendation. Then we've got the issue of whether, are we talking about single-family homes? Are we talking about, or are we talking about commercial and regimes? Or are we just talking about commercial? I guess all these questions say to me, we need to get together and have another, what do we call them, John?
Workshop?
Workshop, where we can get these groups together and we can kind of sort through it. Because, right, as I said, I thought I was going in one direction, I just got changed.
Larry, what I've heard, and I am not an expert on any of this, but just what I heard is that there's an objective to manage runoff, and yet the solution was hypothesized to be pervious, and yet you're saying that that may not work to the extent that we may have been thinking. And it may not work unless there's substantial maintenance, notwithstanding what you said. I take the point about resin, but that there are other considerations that would need to be kind of codified in whatever ordinance and whatever approach is taken here. So it feels like it costs a whole lot more. It may not actually achieve the objectives unless it's more surgically applied into specific areas or applications.
Yeah, I think bottom line, we've done as much as we can do on this today.
Yeah. So why don't we have a motion to table this, and
I move that we table this decision and that we schedule a workshop where we can get a little more information on some of these issues that have been brought up.
Second.
all in favor?
One real quick.
Aye.
Discussion first, always.
Yeah, one real quick point that it says the planning commission shall have the time prescribed in the ordinance, which may not be more than 30 days with which to submit its report and recommendation on the change to the governing authority. If the planning commission fails to submit a report within the prescribed period, it is deemed to have approved the change or departure. So you may want to, instead of deferring, make a recommendation that there be more information gathering, et cetera, to council, and that they defer it, that they're.
Okay, oh, so they, okay.
Thank you.
Uh,
I'll amend my motion to recommend to town council that we need more information in order to make a decision and that they should defer it back to us.
I think we first procedurally have to withdraw the other motion because there's still a motion on the floor.
I thought I said amended it.
Huh?
I thought I amended, okay.
No, yeah, we
Oh, you got to take your seconds off too.
we have to withdraw the motion that was on the floor. I withdraw my second. Now you can make.
I
the
can
new
withdraw my
motion.
motion.
I withdraw my second. We're trying to do it right.
Go ahead.
Now you can make
Go
the
ahead,
motion
make
again.
your
I make a motion that we send, that we recommend to the town council that we cannot act on this, that we need more information, and that they defer it back to us.
Second.
Put workshop, say.
Oh, and or we need a workshop to do it, and they can defer it back to us. Thank you.
And also, can we make sure that,
Wait, first you have to have a second,
Oh,
then you
second,
discuss.
sorry.
Second, now you can discuss.
so can we also make sure that the architects, landscape architects are, well, not only that, but they're informed.
Yes.
So whether they want to come or not is their choice, but I think we want to.
As well as Conservancy, yes.
And also, can we get more information of what other municipalities are doing? I know we've had a list. It seems like a lot of municipalities are moving this way. So maybe we should see some specifics of what they're doing.
And what the impact, because I think, as Sandy's point, we don't want a solution that doesn't really address the problem. We want to be sure what we're doing affects the existential water issue.
More ideas, so what, because it feels like there's a solution here, but what else exists? What other alternatives are there?
So just to remind you, this was just one of the many things.
Sandy, do you mean just to the driveway issue, or do you mean to water management?
To water management, meaning, and sorry, John was trying to
Just
say
wanted to make
something,
sure.
but it wasn't picking up on the
Yeah,
microphone.
That was me. I was saying that this was, at our early beginning process of our resiliency elements, this was, we thought, the easiest, shortest pathway forward as being able to get through some of the bigger true items. And so, as you know, stormwater in general, our first phase of stormwater management does incorporate some other measures to where the property owner would have options to be able to choose things that they can do on site to look at water from a water quality and water quantity standpoint. So we have a little bit more homework to do.
Yep.
All right, and we need to vote on Larry's motion recommendation.
I seconded.
All those in favor of Larry's recommendation to town council?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. You want to go? Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You guys better show up for that workshop.
I don't know, we might have scared them away.
Wow, that must have been the, thank you, guys. That must have been the most important part of our agenda.
So,
For the rules of procedure.
Oh, heaven help us.
That's why you're here.
all right.
Mac, that's why you're here.
Back to rules and procedure.
Oh, my goodness, we got a ways to go, don't we?
Finish section 3.
Finish section 3, so we're now to section 4.
Do we have to make a motion to open it up again, or is that?
Yeah,
Yeah, I move we reopen the discussion.
second.
So-
All those in favor of going back to rules and procedures?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, now we're on section 4. Any amendments?
Ron, not an amendment, but just an observation, which is, when I read this, to me, this is quite administrative and procedural, and John and I talked about this a bit. So I don't have any comments to what's on the page, and maybe it most likely does not belong in kind of, rules and procedures. But to me, the chair sets the kind of, strategic agenda for the activities of the commission over a period of time in collaboration with others, potentially with the council and whomever. And so I just wanted to make that observation. I don't know if, from a process standpoint, if really the point here is just to specify sort of minimum requirements for the functioning of the commission, but it feels to me that the chair is a strategic role, not just an administrative role, which to me this reads like.
Yeah, it's been one of those things that some of the other languages that we added in for like the reference to the other documents, it's been kind of historically known that the chair will work with staff and take those priority objectives from what council has given directives. It's just kind of, do you want to formally put it in there? That's totally fine.
I'm
but-
making an observation. I don't know that it belongs in here,
Yeah.
but it's more kind of a philosophy of role and a kind of how the commission would function.
I took out G and H. H is redundant. We talk about the agenda in a subsequent section on agenda, so that's redundant. It's mentioned in section, it's Article 2, Section 2, the chair shall set the agenda for all meetings of the commission, developed with town staff. It's already said there, so it's redundant to have it in Section 4 here. You don't need it both places.
Okay, and you said G as well?
Yeah, I didn't get why G was added.
That was let me give you the background on it. The background on it was, as I told you, is that I was talking with a member of the council, town council, and he indicated to me that when they are requesting something from the staff, it's got to go through the mayor. The mayor is the point. So I said, well, we should do the same thing through the chairman for two reasons. First of all, I think it keeps the chairman on top of what issues are being worked on and what's being asked from the town council. And secondly, it's for an efficiency because the flow of requests for information is coming from one place. That's why.
I'm reluctant to air the issues I've had recently on that. I'm trying to think how to, I have no problem.
Maybe I could.
Go ahead.
Just say, so an observation from an outsider, we don't always move things through very quickly. Do we want to create more bottlenecks?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Funnel? Would it not make sense for when we have a question for John or for somebody to copy Ron? And if Ron thinks we're out of line or 6 people are asking for the same information, that he step in?
Yeah, I think that's fine, but we didn't say that it has to come. We said coordinated requests. So, keeping him informed, keeping him in a loop is coordinating.
So copy him on an email, would that count? Or I'm just trying to figure out practice versus language on the paper.
Different, because
That's
I've
not really how that
always, I've
be
always
interpreted.
copied the chair on any requests I've made. I mean, that's just, to me, SOP that's just how you should operate.
Well, let me ask you from the negative standpoint. Why wouldn't we want to do that?
I guess.
If the town council operates that
What do
way.
you mean?
I'm sorry?
I said, I guess it means on technically how that would work. I mean, if it means that we just send everything to Ron and then he's got to send it on to the appropriate person, that doesn't seem efficient.
Right.
No,
But if it means that we copy Ron so that he could raise his hand if he thinks we're out of bounds or asking for too much, then yeah, that totally makes sense.
yeah, honestly,
has
I didn't give it that
something to
much
add to
thought.
this.
Honestly, my thought was that keeping the chairman in the loop is the important thing.
Which I think
then
as
we're
a
on the
commissioner
same-
should do
yeah.
anyway. I mean, has
Well,
anybody ever not
then if we
done
do it anyway, then let's put it there.
Go ahead, Brad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Larry, I just wanted to kind of understand your comment that the town council does it this way. I'm not sure what way you were saying.
It was mentioned to me when I was talking about how, the functioning of the committee. I said, I think that we might want to make sure that we are organized in how requests come through to the planning department. And it was told to me by one of the town council members that they have to get your approval to make requests for things.
Maybe there's a little bit of clarification that's warranted, is that what I had indicated is that in order to be kind of most efficient in allocation of staff resource time and developing of priorities, that impositions on staff time needed to come through the mayor, because ultimately I'm only one has visibility on all the things are responsibility. No issues whatsoever in communication.
No.
None whatsoever. It was only where it got to direction, because ultimately I'm the ones that were responsible for supervising the planning department and every other department.
That's the way that was portrayed to me, and that's all I was trying to do here.
Okay.
The difference is we're not talking about communicating. We're talking about something that's going to result in some workflow.
Larry, would it help if we changed the word coordinate to prioritize?
Why?
Because if that's really the intent, to help, provide further, support, guidance, or whatever?
Prioritize, for example, I asked a question after the last meeting to follow up on something that came up at the meeting. I sent a note to the chair and to John asking a specific zoning question regarding this property. Nobody answered me. I followed up with the chair after 2 weeks saying, nobody's answered me, this is not acceptable. The chair gets back to me and said, oh, I thought John was answering. I talked to John at the retreat saying I'm still waiting for an answer. So what is the correct procedure there to get an answer to the question?
I think as the mayor, the purpose from my perspective was to keep the chair aware of things that are going on.
Absolutely.
Number one. And number two, using the priority, I can't remember who said prioritize, but to prioritize the workflow if there is, with the John and the planning department, when there is multiple things to do and trying to schedule them in a way that is most efficient for them and for the agenda items that we have. I'm really surprised the amount of discussion this is taking.
Hear, hear. So at this point, we have an amendment to eliminate H because it's redundant. Do you want to make to eliminate G as well? Joanne, that's your amendment.
What do you guys think?
I think we're...
Jean, Mary Beth? Sam?
I think copying the chair on requests, as I think Sandy brought up, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
I agree.
Always do that,
I'll
yeah.
copy Ron.
Absolutely.
But I think that we should be able to try to get information to get up to speed on an issue as well, without Ron having to say it's okay to give Mary Beth this information or not. I mean, I guess I'm trying to, that's why I was asking, is TCing plenty? And again, I just think there's a whole lot more in here than there was.
Okay, I think we're going off the
versus
deep end
6
here.
pages.
It does not say request approval from the chairman to do this. It said coordinate request.
If that's the intent, then I'm fine with it.
What else would the intent be?
I have no idea.
When I initially read, I thought coordination was to route things through Ron for further action. So if Ron is on there as copy, and I mean, I don't think I've requested that much from town staff in the past, but I have no idea if I make a request, if it's a significant level, if that's going to be required, or a minor level. And I would think that if I make a request to town staff and it's going to require 20, 30 hours, they'll come back and go to Ron and say, this is going to take some time, talk to Gene, bring them in.
And I just want to add, just for the record, I mean, if you guys request things, I mean, that's not, this rules of procedure is not preventing staff from giving you things that assist you to do your job on the planning commission.
Yeah. I think we're all on the same page. It's just whether or not the language needs to be in there. I'm good either way.
I'm good eliminating it, to tell you the truth.
That seems the best course.
Okay, so Joanne, it's your amendment.
Oh, all right, I make a motion that we eliminate G and H redlined.
Any second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, now we're in section, section 5. There's nothing new there.
No, section 5, 6.
Section 6, nothing new there. Okay, moving on to section 7. I think we all made comments regarding, the old verbiage of being mailed versus now being emailed. There was some debate. It used to be 7 business days, which I thought was sort of very long. So I recommended 5 days. Again, our meetings are on Wednesday. We'd like to get the information by Friday. That's sort of optimal. So that's what we're shooting for.
We were discussing whether we should do 5 days or 5 business days. What do people think?
Yeah, I'd like, I hate to be a nitpicker, I'd like to go 5 business days, in cases where there are long weekends, something comes up, it gives the public time to digest what's on the agenda. My personal views on it.
Well, that would make it, you would be requesting the
1 week.
information Wednesday.
Yeah.
Thursday.
It depends on what time you get it. Our meeting is 2 PM, so it'd have to be there before 2
Well, I
PM.
don't think we need to.
I personally, I wouldn't get that granular on it as long as it gets me by Wednesday.
I'd be okay with Thursday even.
Yeah.
But in case people are going out of town or doing something.
I'm just sort of, over the past couple of years, I don't think we've gotten things generally by 5 business days. We're usually getting it Thursday or Friday.
We've been usually getting it Monday.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think this was an issue. Monday is definitely not good.
So
It's a question of how, what the staff can produce, because, what I heard already is even the difficulty getting meeting minutes done, which to me feels like a minimum requirement, that you've got minutes from the prior meeting ready to go. So does that place
Yeah,
unnecessary
it
burden
depends
on?
on the agenda items. There are agenda items which require several approvals. So it just depends on the agenda items. Like, for example, we would have had today's agenda item regarding the engagement with the private sector at our last January meeting. And so we still were gathering information that you all had requested. And so instead of postponing it again, we felt that we probably could still have the meeting today. So, but whatever the commission makes as a cutoff, we'll have that. And if it needs to be pushed to a further month, the issue is that there's certain things that we know that you guys want it advanced a little quicker. So in that case, we'll cut it off and we'll push it to another month. That just extends another month.
Well, you can also amend an agenda. So if something comes up that, we get our information by Thursday or Friday and something comes up Monday you think to be asked, we can do an amended agenda.
And the other thing is, we never try to force you guys to make a decision. So if you never felt ready to make a decision, you're never forced to make a recommendation or take action.
Well, I guess we're hearing obviously different opinions. I guess it comes down to.
5 business days is fine. That's
Okay,
fine, yeah.
so if the staff can get the agenda and the information by 5 business days, then I think we'll all be satisfied with that. So can we have an amendment to put business back in? For section 7E, number 1, it would be 5 business days.
Seem to be the amender here. Okay. I make a motion that the regular meeting information be emailed or made available for pickup to each member of the commission at least 5 business days prior to the scheduled commission meeting.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
I'll make the caveat, we're not going to get real picky of whether it gets there by 2
Oh, my
o'clock
God,
or
no.
not.
All those in favor of 5 business days?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anything else in section 7 that has,
Just,
anyone
Mr.
has?
Chair, just to note, probably you have all ayes, but just to recall, just make sure that nay vote, if there are any, just to call
Okay.
for that as well.
Well, we could ask Ms. Reynolds to do a vote, but she's gone.
Usually you say ayes, nays, and abstentions.
All right, any nays? Okay. Anything else in section 7 that needs to be amended? Okay, let's move on to section 8. This was Jean's.
Yes.
And I think it's been, Jean made a suggestion, and then it was also amended by our legal counsel.
Right, and in my initial language, I kept it very broad because and Mac, thank you for the background today. I thought in my mind that the officers of our commission serve at the pleasure of the majority, right? So I kept it very broad that way to say you're elected and serve at the pleasure of the majority, and the majority can do whatever you want rather than narrow it down to specific causes for removal. So Mac, if the only way to lead this in here is to have specific causes cited, I'm fine with that.
I have a question on that, because after I saw this, I was interested and looked up Robert's Rules. And Robert's Rules doesn't require all this. It wasn't something I'd spent a lot of time on, but we are organized, we're self-governing, we're organized under Robert's Rules. There is a provision in Robert's Rules that allows Jean's language. I'm not pushing it, but
I think it was the
saying-
South Carolina law, though, well, let's hear from Mac, yeah.
Yeah, so the statute speaks to the role of chair and says they shall serve for a year. But then, as Brad pointed out, there is a provision in the code 629-350 that says the governing authority or authorities creating the commission, which is town council, may remove any member of the commission for cause. So, the statute says they got to serve for a year. So the question is, do we want to just take that provision out, and to the extent there's an issue, city council can do it, or we can leave it in? I think the language, I do have one edit, like stylistic to the language, or not stylistic, but it says a majority of vote of all 7 members.
Yeah, you got
We just need to say a majority of the members.
Right.
Because then the member you want to remove doesn't show up to the meetings, and you can never remove the chair.
Well,
Yeah, I just wanted to
being-
comment, because I've had a few conversations with council, and because there are a lot of discussions have come up about the relationship between council and the planning commission, and been parsing the language of the statute pretty extensively. And for example, the council absolutely has zero role with regard to establishing your internal rules and procedures. And you can do whatever you want with regard to your rules and procedures, so long as they are not inconsistent with the state statute or the council's statutory powers. So the council's role vis-a-vis the commission, as far as I can read it, is the council makes the decision whether to have a planning commission or not. That's up to the municipality. No municipality doesn't have to have a planning commission, but once we establish one, then you're within the statutory framework provided under South Carolina state law. The council has the authority and the power to appoint members of the commission, and implicitly in that appears to be to set the terms, because that's not inconsistent with statute, the South Carolina statute, because the South Carolina statute is silent on the length of terms. With the power of appointment comes the power of removal, but the statute says only for cause, not defined. I would think, and this is consistent with AG opinions in other contexts, that while you can establish your own rules and procedures regarding conduct, the Planning Commission itself does not have the authority to remove its own members. That authority resides solely with the council. But again, the council the statute is very clear that the Planning Commission establishes its own rules and regulations of procedure. Council has no role in that whatsoever. I don't know, is all of that consistent with your understanding, Mac?
It is. This is a little bit, so because town council has the power to create and appoint planning commissioners, they can remove them for cause, even though the statute is silent as to the planning commission's authority to remove officers like chair or not. I think implicit in that is they probably can, but the statute doesn't spell that out when it comes to officers. It just says the chair shall serve for a year, and that council can remove members from the planning commission. But the way, this essentially gives them the power, if somebody does something and council for whatever reason doesn't remove them, the chairperson, they could at least remove that person from the position of chair, but they would still remain on the planning commission.
Right.
After the 1 year.
No, so if, it only applies to their role as an officer. So let's say let's say the current chair gets arrested, or maybe not arrested, because then council would remove him. But let's say he just stopped showing up to meetings. And planning commission's like, hey, why aren't you coming to meetings? We need you to work on this. Doesn't show up. So then they would make a motion under Section 8 to have somebody else appointed a chair because they have they've done a neglect of duty by not attending 8 meetings in a row or whatever. The statute doesn't say they have that authority, but also doesn't say that they can't.
They don't,
How
although
does Robert's rules fit in with that?
Robert's
That'd be
rules are
secondary.
kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
They're irrelevant, because I thought we operate under them because it says in our rules of procedure that we operate under Robert's rules, so that's where I was, I don't
If your
care
own
one way or the other.
ordinances don't speak to it or state law doesn't speak to it, then you can look. But that's really parliamentary procedure.
Right.
Yeah, you can adopt as your matter of your own rules of procedure following Robert's rules, but Robert's rules cannot supersede either the town's ordinance or the state statute.
But I guess the real point here is if somebody engages in misconduct, neglect of duty, or malfeasance as the chairperson, they can not only be removed as chair, but they can be removed from the planning commission by council.
Correct.
So
Exactly, yes.
probably the most conservative, safest thing to do is just take this out. But I also think you probably could leave it in and may be okay. But state law is just, there's a question mark there. And so the most conservative advice I would give you is remove it and take this section out. And to the extent there's a problem, town council can remove the problem planning commission member.
Or just remove from off, has to remove them from the commission?
Yes, if council steps in, it's removing from commission. It was just removing
The
from
council
office.
doesn't have any role with regard to who your chair and vice chair
Right.
or any other officer is. What all the council has is the power to remove a member of the commission.
For cause.
Or cause, correct.
Which I would think misconduct, neglect of duty, or malfeasance would probably be cause subjecting them to removal from the entire commission.
As I understood Gene's, and correct me, but Gene's concern, your concern was putting in language to be able to, specifically for the office of chair or vice chair, being able to have something to be able, if that person is not doing misconduct or whatever, that the commission has language that they could be able to operate.
Well,
in it.
Gene's
Right.
suggestion didn't have anything about cause. It just was that the.
It was very broad initially.
By the planning commission,
Yeah.
by majority vote, can remove an officer.
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing
Seems-
about cause.
Yeah, whatever Mac's giving you guys, yeah, whatever.
Right, and then I think, when I put that in initially, I put that because I didn't want to cite particular reasons. After reading Mac's language, I'm more comfortable with Mac's language in terms of having it tied to specific reasons for removal, like you say, stop showing up meetings, malfeasance, whatever, as being cause to vote somebody out of office as chair or vice chair.
Okay,
It technically could be eliminated. I mean, if you look at the officers section where you have chair and vice chair, if for whatever reason the chair is unable to perform, then the vice chair automatically steps in. And so it's covered technically if there's an issue with the chair.
and there's
But in that
also-
case, we would still be carrying a chair though, John, right? The vice chair would be in an acting capacity, but we would still have a chair that's not doing their job.
So no, the vice chair shall exercise the duties of chair in his absence, disability, or disqualification of the chair.
But who would determine disqualification under that?
That's what I thought your language is kind of referencing disqualification, but
well, we
is
have
there,
to,
is there an issue removing it as recommended? I mean, is there an issue with it being removed?
That's definitely the safest course, because if you have a problem planning commission member, town council can remove them from the planning commission for cause. If you have a member, though, that town council doesn't want to remove, but for whatever reason you leave this in and you remove them and that member gets upset, they likely could sue and say there's nothing in state law that allowed you to remove me as chairperson. It says I shall serve for the period of a year, and town council was unwilling to remove me from the planning commission. So the safest bet's take it out, but I also think this is consistent with the authority given to town council with respect to this body, and this body sets its own rules. So we'd have a good argument that, look, if town council can create, appoint, and remove you, you guys appoint and decide who the chair is, so you can also remove that person for cause if they do something wrong.
Only as chair, not from.
Not from the planning commission.
Correct.
Just
Only an officer, correct.
Gene, you want to,
I'm inclined to leave it in, honestly. I hope we never, ever have to use it.
okay, so we're going to accept it as is,
Except for the 7.
except for,
Yeah, so
Seven.
what I suggest striking through is it says after, it says after a majority vote of I can't remember what, it said
remove all
seven
seven.
members. So I just say
Remove the
after
word
a
seven.
majority vote of the members of the planning commission, after a majority vote of the members.
so can we have an amendment to remove all 7? Replace it with the.
I'll make that motion. So in section 8, the motion is to remove the reference to all 7 members and have it read a majority vote of all members of the planning commission.
Of the members.
Of the members.
We don't want to have all either.
Of the members.
Yeah, of the
Yes.
members.
Okay, is there a second for that?
Second.
All right, all
Second.
those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, we're moving on, slowly but surely. All right, we're into meetings. Section 1, not much change. It's already been approved. Anyone have any dissension? No? Going forward, Section 2, the agenda. This needs to be amended to, back to 5 business days.
Right. Motion to reinstate business days to section 2.
Second.
All those in favor of that change?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? No. Section 3, this was Jean, shall and must.
And can I make one other suggestion with this section?
Sure.
Can we specify a majority as 4 members? So you could read a majority in parentheses, number 4 of the members of the commission shall constitute a quorum.
Do you mean present or for?
Well,
4.
I think legally 4 is a quorum, because we have 7 members, you got to have 4. I mean, if only 5 of us show up, 3 is.
I just want to make sure I understand. You're just wanting to see what the quorum number is listed in the materials.
Yes, in my mind, it raised the question for the period of time between February 1 and today's meeting when the new members were appointed, right? When we had 2 members rotating off, was our quorum 3 at that time because there were only 5 members, or was it 4?
It's always.
So I just want to set it for all,
No,
for
so.
purposes of clarity, that was 4
Your
for all times.
quorum is based on the number of members seated, so, or appointed rather. So if you only have 5 members appointed, quorum would be 3.
So that
Wait,
goes
I
back,
thought-
that goes back to the section way back when, where we said January 31st, and we eliminated the, until the new members are seated. So if,
My understanding from previous committees and things I've been on, if your commission is 7 people, a quorum is 4. If you happen to have vacancies, your quorum is still 4.
No,
It's like
in
the
order to
town-
take action, you need a majority of your, you need
You need
a
4
majority
people.
of the quorum, which is 4, and
Just
for
4.
a 7-member body. Just the example, if there is only 5 members seated, you're still able to operate as long as there's a quorum of that present body.
No,
That means that the
That's why I'd like to clarify this
means that
section to say
that
that
means the
majority for
planning
all
commission
purposes is
would never
4.
be able, that means planning commission, town council, if they don't have a full seated 5 members for council, they would never be able to take any business
no,
action.
as long as, the town council is 5 members. As long as they have 3 members present, they can take action because they have a quorum. That happened when they extended the
Yes.
ARDA. So the quorum is based on the total number of bodies in a council or commission. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mac, but my understanding is we are a 7-member body. A quorum is 4. If we happen to have a vacancy, Madeline Kay gets put on town council and we only have 6, our quorum is still 4. You know, when we
I think y'all are saying the same thing, I think.
No.
And that's why I just want to clarify it in this section,
Yeah, no, I
to
think.
say that a quorum is 4.
Yeah, it
for all
doesn't matter if
intents-
there are
yeah.
vacancies or not. The quorum is 4.
For purposes of what's been, a quorum for the planning commission is the majority of the members, which is 4. The majority. Well, that's why I asked the question. If you're wanting to explicitly make 4 the number officially of quorum, that's different
Yes.
than saying a majority of the members. That's the question I asked.
Yeah, it's like when we, in January of '23, when we only had 5 people because we had 2 vacancies, our quorum was still 4. It wasn't 3.
Your quorum was a majority of those members, which would have been 3.
So Mac, because you can set your own rules, but Mac, let me
Yeah.
just understand, in the municipal context, if you had 2 members of a council, it was a 5-member council, resign midterm, and you had to have a special election to replace them, is it at that point in time, a 3-member council, in which case action could be taken by 2 members? Or is it still, which I believe to be the case?
I would think, yes, what you just said is
Yeah.
correct. If it's a 5-member council and there are 2 vacancies and there's only 3, 2 would constitute a majority.
Constitute a quorum and a majority.
3 would constitute, I don't know whether 3 would, 2 of them obviously would constitute a majority of the 3, but would 3 be a quorum even though, yeah, I would think so.
3 would
I
be
would
the
think so.
quorum, not 2.
Well, it would be a majority of the members of the council, I would think would have to be the case.
Yeah, 'cause otherwise you wouldn't be able to act.
Yes, but again, I'm just trying to look at the analog in a municipal context. I think you could do your own rules because the state statute doesn't specify otherwise, but just that might be
I'm just thinking of
useful.
Congress, don't they have to have a certain number to do a quorum? Because don't they do all their little things by denying a quorum and stuff, by not showing up? I mean, you have to have, I thought quorums were specifically defined as a majority of the number of the body.
Certainly, you made an interesting point, in Congress, in the House of Representatives, regardless of how many members are actually seated or show up at a period of time, you have to have 218 votes. Now, whether that's by virtue of their own rules or not,
Now, we're getting over
I
our
don't
heads
know.
here.
Yeah, I mean, this is, we have to table this one to get the definition correct in this context.
I think we can
No, I
make
mean,
our
I
own
think it's fine
definition.
as written.
We can set our own quorum rules.
Yeah,
according
I
to
would leave it
Roberts,
as written,
in terms of what
Gene.
constitutes a quorum. So that's my simple suggestion, that we say a majority is 4.
So here, this is taking a definition of quorum from the FOIA statute, because I knew it would come up there, because that's an illegal meeting.
Yeah.
If you have a quorum of members and don't notice it. So it says quorum, unless otherwise defined by applicable law, means a simple majority of the constituent membership of a public body.
So the membership of this body is 7, a quorum is 4.
Correct. So as written, this is fine.
Yeah, so we'll leave it.
Okay.
So again, we're going to have 4 members present to have a meeting.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
In order to take business, you guys still technically can meet.
Yeah, I've been in meetings where we haven't had a quorum and you can still talk about stuff, you just can't take any action.
Correct.
You can't have any votes.
Right.
Okay, so section 3 will remain as already
Yes.
approved?
Yeah.
Section 4 seems
I don't know why you took out which edition, I don't care.
Doesn't matter.
We're on the 13th now, so.
I say I feel like every
think
year,
latest
every
edition is
year
probably
we.
All right, so I think we're all good with section 4, and we're going to go to section 5. Gene, this was
Yeah, this
written
was.
quite a bit about conflict of interest.
Oh, yeah.
This was our discussion, Gene, and I just, opposed to the paragraph that you had shared referenced the state statute, so if that's kind of where that comes from in that particular section.
I went through and read the statute.
And this is something I
don't
saw
have a
in
problem
Sullivan's
with it.
Island Planning Commission Rules of Procedure, where members would have to self-identify any potential conflicts of interest and recuse themselves from proceedings where they might be tainted.
I have a question a little bit earlier. Is now the appropriate, in section 5, is now the appropriate time to ask that?
Yes.
Okay, sentence 1 states a member must be present to vote. And then it goes on to say what present means. Sentence 3 says each member shall vote on every question unless disqualified by law. Shouldn't that be each member present? Because according to this, everything we've done today doesn't count because John's not here.
Good point.
Yeah, put in the word present. Good catch, Mary Beth.
Sorry, I just saw it now.
The question is whether y'all want to truly force a vote on certain matters. I think it was a planning commission last week where there wasn't a true legal conflict or legal basis for recusal, but under Robert's rules, for personal reasons, he wanted to abstain from the vote because of it wasn't a legal conflict, but it could create perception issues with the public. And so there may be times when certain members of this body, given a relationship with somebody or friendship or connections, there's not a legal conflict or required recusal in the statute where you may not want to vote.
And then you abstain.
Then you would abstain. This would say you got to vote yes or no on it or recuse.
No, but a vote,
Right.
abstain.
My
is a vote.
issue with that is that
Oh,
we have to have everybody vote for anything to matter. I think it needs to be clarified that it's present.
Yeah, we all agree with
Agree
that.
on that.
Well,
Okay,
I'm
okay,
just.
so we're
what-
moving on.
what Mac just said is an abstention's not a vote. And that's a problem because
So
there are
it's
issues where
unless
some of us will
disqualified
abstain.
or self-recuses.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Wait, say
Good.
again?
So each member shall vote on every question unless disqualified by law or recuses.
But that takes away abstention. What Mac is saying, which I didn't realize, that takes away abstentions, and there are situations where we abstain. Some of us will abstain
But
on
wouldn't,
something for whatever reason.
Well, and you would technically treat a recusal or a abstention kind of the same boat. You're just not formally recusing yourself for a matter by record.
Yeah,
But
like
you
in
can
my
state-
particular instance, it was like he did not have a legal basis to recuse. Like it wasn't a conflict of interest. He didn't have a financial tie, but there was a connection and he was concerned about the perception and he abstained on it. This,
Okay, so. and
you
if-
could say
if
unless
there's a-
disqualified by law, recuse or abstains.
Or should we just take out that each member shall vote on every question and just take that out? Because people will abstain on things. We've had abstentions by all of us, I'm sure, at various times on various issues.
I think you would want
You have
the
to be
latter,
one of those three
what
things.
Mac's his previous, adding in both of those options. And that covers, I think, all a range of.
Yeah, you can either add them in or just take that sentence out. But I didn't want y'all to get to a spot where, for personal reasons, you can't recuse yourself, but you don't want to vote on an issue.
Yeah, we
Because
want
an
to be.
abstention can be for any it could just be a controversial issue that you don't want to vote on.
Yeah.
So let's just have an amendment to take that sentence out. Each member shall vote on every question.
Yeah, I don't think we need that, do we?
I don't think so.
All right, let's take it out.
So can I have an amendment to remove that sentence?
Motion to remove that sentence.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I,
Any nays? Any problem with the rest of the section?
Section from that? I went through, I pulled up what that section 700 was and read it. I don't have a problem with it.
I wouldn't mind taking a 5-minute break. Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ron, if we're, I don't know how long we're gonna go, but I have to pick my dog up at some point.
This is
So,
unusually long.
okay. Otherwise, she's boarding there tonight. I don't know what that-
Probably got a good friend.
I should be out of here at 15:15, but I can hop back on by phone.
I mean, you could probably say they amended
I think we're close enough.
section 1 to do this.
I think we're close enough.
Okay.
But don't turn it off.
This is not my favorite stuff.
Honestly, you know, I understand the need to do Robert's rules, but man, it, okay, gotcha.
There is a problem.
Low battery.
Low battery.
We're still in session. I'll be home at about, probably before, what time is it now? 4:47, maybe 5:30. No, by 5:30. We're good. Yeah, we're good. All right. Talk to you later. Thanks for letting me know. Bye. Okay. Hard stop, 5:30. Got to go.
Gotcha. Hi, I'm Sandy Devine. So
Nice to meet you. Folks on. So are y'all two the new gals on?
Yes.
That's awesome. Normally Boone, my associate at Tenzie, said normally it's either me or Boone that comes to these, just depending. Boone's in a 3-day construction deposition. So I was at one of these till 10 o'clock last night, planning commissions. Had Kiowa Town Council then over in Hanahan for their meeting.
Don't even
Busy
think
week.
about- Don't even think about it. 10 o'clock is not on my biorhythms.
It normally, like, 'cause I get up at like 5 and go work out in the gym, so I'm normally go to bed fairly early.
Yeah,
I was tired this morning in the gym.
yeah.
Once I get up and like exercise, I'm fine the rest of the day. It's just getting out of bed.
You guys who exercise in the morning, I can't. First, I need my coffee and I need to start it. I do mine in the afternoon.
I drink it. I think it's 200 milligram caffeine drink. That helps.
That'll start your.
300 your daily limit, so 2 doesn't quite get me there, but it gets me up.
Okay, that's okay. I would have brought dinner for my dog.
Yeah, well, my husband's taking me out for my birthday.
You good, John?
Whew.
Okay.
It's taken longer than I thought.
Did you get your sugar fix? You had a sugar fix?
I didn't, but I'm going out for dinner, so.
I'll take some candy.
So
Did anybody show you where the water and that stuff is?
No, but I've been okay with what I have
Okay.
so far. Yeah.
Get some, you want another one?
I'm sure, I'll take another one.
have a special. Just the rest of the agenda.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's still a lot of meat. I mean, hopefully it will be a little less contentious, but I think we could.
For just everything else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jean?
Yes.
Texting?
What's that?
Nothing.
That thing you said, I have no intention of, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to make any motion like you suggested.
That's okay. You don't have to worry about it.
I sent you an email and you ghosted me.
What do you mean go?
I was on this call.
No, I said, John was trying to set up something. That's why.
I was listening, so Larry. Ultimate question, I was like, dang it, I gotta go, the guy sit down.
Three of us to get together.
But I wrote to you.
Well, that's because he was trying to arrange.
Oh, watch.
Oh, okay. I didn't, again,
It was just to you.
well, I mean,
You just asked, so they're probably.
me and John, so
Oh, me.
I didn't look, I thought it was the same.
Did somebody turn off the feed from Kiowa?
No, it's
Mary Beth
not.
and I have black screens.
Thought it was just
Put a
me.
quarter in.
I can see you guys. All right, I am going to get a sugar.
There we are. Okay. Now I can see you guys.
I know what that
We all
did.
back?
We're back.
All back, yes.
Let's get this show on the road so I can get on the road.
We are going to adjourn after this section.
Yes.
Okay, so we've finished section 5 by eliminating each member shall vote on every question. Now we're at section 6. There's no changes. Section 7. This section, again, was something that we basically saw in the Hilton Head Rules of Procedure. Thought it was maybe a good thing to add to ours.
Yeah, I have concerns with this section because we just talked about quorum, right? And if we have less than a quorum, we're not having an official meeting. I don't see a need for this.
Well, I don't think there's not a great need. It was, like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with.
The only thing I would say that is that I've been involved in subcommittee meetings where there are 3 people.
Right.
And if 3 of you meet and that's a member of the committee, we'd have to FOIA the meetings so that's probably where some of the issues are. Like if you're in a subcommittee with 2 other people and all 3 of you got together, you'd have to FOIA the meeting.
So, yeah, so the ex parte communications are prohibited by law when you're a quasi-judicial body. And so, generally speaking, everything the BZA hears is quasi-judicial, whether it's they're determining whether John properly enforced his zoning ordinance, whether a variance is needed, or whether there's a special exception. This body and town council are unique in that in certain circumstances, you're sitting as a quasi-judicial body. In other circumstances, like this, you're sitting as a legislative body and legislating and just creating policy. But for example, when you review a plat or you review a site plan and you're approving something like a judge would, that's the easiest way to think about it, is when are you sitting as a judge, when are you sitting as a legislator? You're not to have ex parte communications. And that means with the applicant, like a developer, or with city council on those matters. You're supposed to be totally impartial, unbiased, and not talk to anyone about it. Now, that's very difficult because you have constituents, people want to talk to you, but that technically is prohibited. So this is probably a best practice provision. This doesn't say when you're sitting in a quasi-judicial role, though. This is just across the board, which is that's what the Municipal Association would recommend. That is best practice, but it certainly is prohibited in the quasi-judicial context. And the reason it's best practice is if a developer, for example, submits a plat for y'all to review, and that plat gets denied, and there is a FOIA request that shows members of town council were telling you to deny it and why, that decision could be overturned by a court. And it happens all over the country. There's a bunch of cases in our planning commission and BZA training. We have like 6 or 7 slides just on ex parte communication. So it is something to be very careful with, that you're not being influenced. And it's technically an ethics violation. Like if a town council member were to tell you how to vote or try to influence your vote on a matter that's quasi-judicial, that's a violation of the act.
And I'd be more comfortable with this if it was more narrow in scope. So for example, I think it was either earlier this week or last week, town staff, John and I, had discussion regarding permeable surfaces. That's a pending matter before the commission, right?
That's legislative, though, so you're good. Y'all are just in a recommendation.
But this says all discussions of pending matters.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
just eliminate
This
it?
covers the entire gamut, which a lot of municipalities do that because it's generally best practice.
What Mac was recommending, Gene, was to add in a qualifier for, was it essentially legislative matter or quasi-judicial matters?
Yeah, when the planning commission is sitting as a quasi-judicial body.
Subdivisions, things like that, yeah.
Need this
Can
in
you give
here.
me an example of quasi-judicial?
Yeah, so if you're reviewing and approving a preliminary plat.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
But like, the easiest way to think about it, because it's confusing, is like if you're legislating or making a recommendation on an ordinance, that's just your legislative functions. But if you're deciding someone's fate like a judge,
Okay.
then that you're sitting in your role as quasi judicial. Planning commission though and council are difficult because probably most of the time you're sitting in a legislative role. But there are times with both town council and planning commission when you're sitting in a quasi judicial role.
Okay.
I make a motion, we eliminate section 7.
Second.
All those in favor of eliminating section 7, say aye.
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 Okay, on to section 8.
I had no problem with this. This is what we do anyway.
Good.
So
Good.
we're good with section 8. We move on to public hearings. There's been no changes to section 1 and 2. Anyone have any difficulties with section 1 and 2?
No.
Okay. We're on now to Article 4, records, and there's been changes about how long we need to keep the recordings.
Yeah, so the recommendation was just to strike it. Right now, we keep all of our minutes and our recordings is by just.
As public
Yeah,
record.
so it's public record.
I make a motion, we approve section 1 as amended, as,
We already have.
oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
So unless there's a change, we don't need to.
wait, this is different than our rules used to be, though, because we used to have 2 years used to be in there, so this is new.
No,
is good.
remember, because you made recommendations, approve this.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
My bad, my
So we're
bad.
only
Fine.
have to, if we're making changes.
Got it.
Section 2 and 3, no changes. The next page, no change other than the date.
Sounds good.
Any difficulties with any of the remaining parts of the document?
No, sir.
All right, so we've gone through each section, made amendments, and so I think we're done with that section. I've spoken to John. One of our commissioners has to leave soon. I think we've been at it for 3 hours. We still have quite a bit to discuss, but I think we've kind of run out of time for today. So I'd like to hear opinions on whether we want to have a special meeting to continue the business that we haven't gotten to, or do you want to delay it till next month?
I'd be for having a special meeting.
I'm just looking, the zoning permit thing, as I read it, I don't think it's time sensitive. I
Well, other
would,
than just we want to get it moving.
we want to get it moving. We did talk about getting a subcommittee
For special
started
use.
on the permitted use table. I wouldn't want that to slip a month if you just want to assign and let us get started on that.
Okay, is anyone, everyone's looked at the permitted use table? I think
Before we move on, can y'all make a final motion to adopt these rules as amended at today's meeting?
Sure.
So moved.
Oh, yes.
second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor of accepting the rules and procedures as amended today, say aye.
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 Any nays? No. All right. Permitted use, you all saw the tables. I think the mayor has expressed that too many conditional use, too many Cs. And so I think that the goal of reviewing the permitted use table is that we go through each of those, and if they're permitted, fine. If they're not permitted, then we want to have them go to S and not as many Cs.
Well, we also want to look at the whole thing, because it was lifted 100, way
Right,
back in the beginning
right.
from Charleston
It's from
County.
Charleston, yeah.
And some of the things just aren't relevant, so we really
Right.
need to just take a comprehensive look at the
Yeah,
table.
so what staff was recommending that we form a subgroup
Sure.
of commissioners to kind of push that along. And I think that could be something that we form two, maybe three if we need to, and then we can have that work group along with some of the other ordinances that we have coming next month. And so we have multiple groups, and then that recommendation can kind of be brought back to the full group. So that would be staff's recommendation.
And Joanne, you're interested?
Yeah.
Sandy?
I would be interested.
Sandy, Joanne, one more?
We can do it.
I'd love to. I'm not back on Kiowa until beginning of March.
There'll be a lot of work to go around.
Yeah,
So
I
we
think
don't.
Sandy and
All
I
right,
can do
so
it.
Sandy and Joanne will be our subgroup to work on permitted uses.
The one other thing that I think is important that we've been talking about again for a long time is this beach overlay zone. It is time sensitive. I know we don't have anything to present, but I think before the March meeting, that gives us all, or the, where are we? I lose track of time. Before the next meeting, I think we should, I'd like to see us have a recommendation to vote on. If we can pull the information together, we have a whole month.
I'm happy to work on that with some help.
I'll work on
We'll
that
work
too.
with Mary
Well,
Beth and.
the question went back to, do we want to have a special meeting before next month to look at our planning priorities for 2025, the
Zoning permits.
the zoning
Zoning.
permit regarding bulkheads and,
I could go either way on a special meeting, but I want to make sure the
Exactly.
subcommittees are formed so that we can take action at the next meeting. I don't think we'll be
I
able
thought
to.
that, I don't think we have enough information about the beach overlay. I think that would also be something that we need the information on before we,
Well, that's why we have a whole month to, I mean, we've been pushing this off. So I think if I'll work on it with Mary Beth, we'll get going on it and have something to present at the March meeting. We have a
Sure.
whole month.
good, sounds good.
You good with that,
Yeah,
Mary Beth?
Oh, I'm good with that.
Okay.
all right. So we have a subgroup to work on beach overlays and a subgroup to work on permitted uses. And then I guess we can delay the discussion on planning priorities till March, unless we want to.
Should we wait until March to figure out what our plan is for the year?
No, I think we should have a special meeting, but Joanne.
I agree.
I'm happy either way. I just want to make sure these other two things get moving.
Okay. So John, why don't you look in your calendar and,
We'll provide some dates for options for you all. We'll send that out, and so we can get your availability in the next
Okay.
2 weeks. Yeah.
Super, thank you.
all right. Any other comments from the commissioners before we adjourn?
Welcome to our two new commissioners.
Happy to be
Happy to have you on board.
And we promise
you.
the meetings usually are not this long.
Next time I'll make
Not so
different
sure about
arrangements.
Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Guys, later.
Aye. Ooh, go get that dog. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Beth, virtually.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Mac, for clarifying.